The majority of property owners in the town of Boothbay are successful and accomplished. Money and tax regressivity are not necessarily the hottest topics in the town, but demographics of Boothbay are very interesting. Although the majority of Boothbay are clearly satisfied with the cost of local government services, there is a strong population of working class that supports that majority. Honestly, in Boothbay, there are very few people between the two classes. Also considering the town receives very little state subsidies because of the total value of the town, the impact of regressivity on local property taxes is even more significant. I encourage them to support LR 2721 and the municipal revenue sharing back to 100%. And honestly, to bring that down to a level of more personal nature, as a kid growing up, my family owned hundreds of acres. We didn't have any money, but we had tons of land. I used to chop wood for my grandfather, and he knew exactly how much wood we had to chop before we paid the local property taxes. When I came back from the Marines in my 20s, we tried to figure out how you couldn't chop wood anymore. How do we pay local property taxes? My advice to him was sell some of your land. He didn't take my advice, didn't sell any of his property, and now I'm in my late 30s and I'm doing the same thing as him. How do I pay for my property taxes? I'm not necessarily rich. Revenue sharing is intended for those people to not lose their homes that have money, that don't have the necessary money. They're landowners, they may have inherited it. It's an attempt to bring progressivity to a regressive tax. I use that example in Livermore because we were the Moores, obviously my mother's maiden name, but down the street were the Lovewells, and there were the Boothbys. And you could make the same comparison in Boothbay. I look at Chuck, you could say it's the Cunningham, you could say it's the Lewises. There are people that own land in this town that may not necessarily have the ability to pay that's tied to their tax amount. So I think it's very important that they reestablish revenue share.
Where's the support for that? I mean, where does it stand in the state, on the state level?
Right now, the way the budget was written last year is revenue sharing is gone if they don't find $40 million in savings in the state. It takes legislative action in order to stop that. So this bill has been proposed, which would stop it at the level it is right now, which is less than half funded, which is better than nothing. And essentially that's why I supported it individually. The Democrats are essentially proposing that bill. If I were to predict, it will probably get vetoed the first time around, and they'll be looking for a supermajority to pass it. It's possible, and there were certainly Republicans in support, but I think they wanted to hear from the towns. And so 100 people showed up today and testified from Mexico, Rumford, Boothbay, all over the map. Presque Isle came down with 8 public employees. It's pretty impressive.
We won't know for months. Till the end of March, at least.
Yeah, it's going to be like last year. We're probably going to get ready for town meeting, not knowing how much revenue sharing we're going
But
to
they
have.
conveniently made it so it's part of the bill to cut it unless they can find, so they don't really have to vote to cut revenue sharing. They have to vote to basically restore it.
In my personal opinion, they've also tied other things into that bill that may make it less appealing. There's better situations. There are essentially ways to generate more revenue so that they don't have to take that $48 million from the towns. And I'm not sure how appealing those things are.
Next up is approve minutes from the previous meeting of the 12/31 and 1/8. That is right.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it's right. I'm thinking we're in the first of the month.
So,
Second.
You made second. Any discussion?
the motion is for both sets?
Yes. All those in favor? Next up is Bob Foss, Maine Eastern Railroad Project.
David Catherine's here also. I sent you a letter a few weeks back, kind of summarizing the situation. This situation did not exist as of about December 1st. But the Maine Eastern Railroad, Main Eastern Railroad is actually owned by the state of Maine, Department of Transportation. They own the tracks, they own the rail, but the Morrisville and Erie Railway has a contract with DOT operating. Back about 12 or 13 years ago, the state spent a lot of money to upgrade that track. That track is one of the best in Stilltown. All the way up to Rockland, there's very little speed limit on it. It's in beautiful condition, except for it's not used very much. It's only used really to haul cement, for the most part, back and forth, Thomaston to Rockland. So this wasn't on the radar, and what happened was that back in early December, the operator, Morristown and Morristown and Erie, asked for a meeting with Wisconsin, because Wisconsin is essentially their hub in the Big Coast, and they said that they wanted to try to expand passenger rail service. And this turned out to be a unique opportunity because for years we had heard that they couldn't. What the rail was trying to do was trying to make the Main Eastern Railroad was trying to make a commuter connection between Brunswick and Rockland, which was essentially impossible because it's 2.5 hours to go all that way. So you can't have that. It doesn't serve a commuter thing to go that far. Then to serve just the visitor, people who live in Rockland, they had about a 2-hour layover. So you go all the way to Rockland, you got 2 hours, 2.5 hours, you're going to hop on the train and go back. So that really didn't work at all. When the Downeaster started its service to Brunswick a few years back, the operator felt no, there's no way they can make a connection. They just couldn't do, they just could not do it. So it ended up that we had 2 independent rail schedule. We had the Downeaster with their rail schedule, we had the Main Eastern with its rail schedule. Never the 2 shall meet, which is a big deal. So the operator now, they decided that they were going to do whatever they can to make at least seasonal rail service viable on the coast. And so they worked up an agreement with the Downeaster. And essentially what happens is that someone who's on the Downeaster and arrives in Brunswick, within about a half hour, roughly a half hour, they get off the Downeaster, hop on the Main Eastern, and continue their journey. That's a big, big deal. And the same thing in reverse. They coming from Rockland or any place in the mid-coast, hit Brunswick, hop on off one train onto the other. As part of this agreement, they've agreed to do cross promotions. Essentially, the Main Eastern will be advertising for a station in Boston, and you'll be able to buy a seamless ticket. For example, you would sit in North Station, buy a ticket, or you do it online, of course, buy a ticket from North Station to Rockland, if you want, or Wisconsin, or wherever. That was not really, that wasn't possible before. So when we had this meeting in Wisconsin, the very own Barnes and I met with folks from Wisconsin and Main Eastern. They were looking at, well, what other services we could provide. And obviously, the big one is Boothbay Harbor, with almost 1,300 rooms down here, tons of rental cottages, all kinds of services, tourist draws, as you know, here, the Railway Village, Coastal Maine Botanical Garden, et cetera, et cetera. And they were actually, the railway folks had no idea about this area. So they investigated it, they came up, we had a second meeting, they said, we got to do something, we have to have access. And so that's when we came up with this shuttle project. We have been pestering DOT for a long time to see if we can get funding to do a feasibility study for either seasonal or year-round transit, which would essentially be small vans or buses, because that's been a big demand now. We've never been able to make that connection, but now we have a private business coming to us and saying, let's do something. So that's where we came up with the shuttle idea. We've Mary Ellen Mars has done a lot of research talking to potential operators, looking at costs, looking at schedules, and then looking at, once we get folks down here, how do we get them to the places where they want to go? And not only that, the residents and the summer visitors. So it's really a two-phase, a two-part project. The first part is to get them from Wiscasset down here. And that's the shuttle. And the shuttle would be timed to meet the rail. And someone who would buy a ticket, the ticket would actually say Portland to Boothbay Harbor, or Boothbay Harbor to North Station. That would be the ticket. And inherent in that ticket would be the shuttle component. So that's the first part, so that they would know that they're getting down there, they don't have to drive a car, they can bring a bike and do whatever. The second component is that the rock tide trolley, which is a tremendous service, that's mostly an inner loop. It hits the inner parts of the harbor. But an awful lot of people, as we know, the Costa Rica Botanical Gardens hit 100,000 visitors, which is tremendous. One of the biggest tourist draws anywhere anywhere in Maine. Railway Museum, the Country Club, Commons, the Aquarium. How do we do that? So the second component of this is a second trial. There would be time. It would be one that would run like 8 or 9 hours a day and hit these places on a schedule, kind of like the rock thing does it, a bigger loop. And we're proposing this. This is we want to test the waters this year and see how this will work. Everyone I've talked to, and everyone who's called me, in fact, I should say the operator of the farmer's market down here, which I think is a Thursday operation. I got the email the day after this hit the newspaper saying, what can we do next year to get folks up here? And that's the way things build like that. So, in any event, everyone has been extremely interested and supportive. And this is not a tourist project. This is a transportation project. So a resident or a summer visitor will have just as much access to the shuttle or the trolley as anyone else. It's not age or income or anything else. It's just we're trying to see if this fits in the market. So our estimate of the cost for both of those things for the summer, the 3-month season, is about $45,000. We've got a request to the Department of Transportation to fund 80% of that. We've got a meeting coming up pretty soon. We have not actually had a response from them yet. But in May, I don't know what the prospects are at this point because we haven't met. But we're looking at our proposal is a 20% local match. So we've gone to the county commissioners who said that they would provide $1,000. The Whitman County Regional Planning Commission Board has provided $1,000. Catherine's organization provided $1,000. She and others will be going to some of these other large institutions to ask about some funding. But really to make it real, we're going to both Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor to see if you will contribute, which I think is a modest amount. But of course, it's your budget. I'll be at Boothbay Harbor on Monday. We need to hit that $9,000 mark very quickly so that we can show that we have this a viable project with the Department of Transportation. Now, this is not money we're going to spend until we actually have a project, an operator, and a contract. And if this is a very, very, very short time frame project so far. I mean, I'm here tonight, and it's been about a month and a half. If we don't get the DOT funding or something happens, then what we will take advantage of the time and see if we can do some more planning for the following season. So what I'm asking you tonight is if you, for the warrant for the next town meeting, would put an item on there for the $2,000 request with the understanding that this donation will only be for this project and either be likely fiscal 14 or possibly fiscal 15, depending on how we do with the Department of Transportation.
Do we need to take a look at putting it on the warrant, or could we take that away out of contingency with the same stipulations that we just talked about?
fits the nature of what you've used contingency for in the past 2 years. We generally find a project that we think has economic development significance, and we free up about $2,000. We did it with the Chamber's map to try to get businesses in Boothbay to participate in the map, which they were probably underserved before, and then last year's the Getting Away Together video. We put some money and some effort into that, so it fits that category easily.
Bob, being a transportation project, and you mentioned the Botanical Gardens, you mentioned the Railway Village, the Common, is the trolley going to go over to Ocean Point? That's a heavily congested area in the summertime, and if we can get a few vehicles off the road over there, that'd be a good thing.
I'll tell you what, I would be talking to both towns. You know, all we did at this point was try to figure what is a doable project and try to estimate costs. But at this level, we haven't, there's been no decisions or anything finalized. So if you folks have input or requests, we will have to figure what the costs are, that type of thing, but we'd be absolutely happy to consider it. I understand the Ocean Point, because I hear that quite a bit. Again, this is a seasonal thing, but it seems like the stars have aligned, at least for this brief period of time, that we really want to take advantage of. And before, I'd like Catherine just to give you an update on some of the calls and information you requested. She's got it.
Today I got a request from Steve Grasso. He's in the travel industry, it's called an on-site person. So he's a person down in Massachusetts who has been begging for shuttles or something like this to bring people up so he can create packages and tours and bring people. He works with the Downeaster to have them come up this way. So I think that it is a bit of an unknown, but I think if you build it, I think they will come. So, but we have to be able to put, in my region guide, I went out a little bit on a limb and I put, get here by, train, and I put an asterisk with a shuttle, but I think if you can sell something from Boston to Boothbay Harbor, that's pretty exciting, and the Maine Eastern Railroad said that they could take a portion of that ticket that they could put towards the project as well. But if you make it expensive, then people aren't going to get on it. They're not going to do it. But I think there's also an event piece that ties in with the Lobster Festival and also the Blues Festival. And I've talked to the Penobscot Bay Chamber executive, and they have 60,000 people there. They don't have accommodations. They don't have a way to, we have the accommodations, so it would be nice. They might provide some funding too to help with a special events training to bring people back up there, so people stay here and then go up that way. So I think if we could get some commerce and some things moving, there would be interest.
Is the plan to have the money that you're requesting from the towns be seed money, or is this going to be a yearly request?
We want to see what happens this year. This is really the experiment. How popular is it? And then probably midsummer, maybe towards the end of summer, we're going to sit and figure out, okay, how popular was it and where do we go from here? Now, I'll say that the Department of Transportation funds these Explorer routes. You've got the Mountain Explorer that's operating right now that goes up to Sugarloaf, I think it's on the river. Then you've got the Explorer. There's one on the southern coast that goes to some York County locations. You've got the Mount Desert, Ellsworth, Desert Explorer. So in the future, we may be looking for a subsidy. That doesn't mean we can pull everything out of the Department of Transportation. It's all an unknown right now.
So the funds that you're looking for is a local match to go with DOT money. Now, is that money intended for a study, or is that money
No.
intended for subsidy?
No, there's no study. The study would be, we'll do a survey. When Mr. Jones gets on with Mrs. Jones, where we're from, and that, we plan to do that. So we understand what this market might be. But no, this is all to operate. We probably all go out to a contract to an operator who will actually provide the vans or whatever the shuttle will provide with the trolley.
And you mentioned earlier that there was a company that approached you about the shuttle service. Is it too early to name that company?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are some, there's a couple of companies that operate in Lincoln County. And, of course, they're interested. But time is so, there's so many, time is such a big issue here. It's the marketing that Catherine is talking about. There are these shuttle operators, or people who, transit operators, I should say, the existing transit operators, they're looking to make contracts right now, so that they're busy this summer. So, and then, so things are unfortunately, it's such a compressed time frame. So I can't name those folks, and I can't even assure you that they're, both of them are interested, and there may be more. It's just, I'm a land use planner, I'm not a rail person. I'm hoping to make out of this project with at least a little of my dark hair somewhere in there. It's going rapidly.
I think it'd be silly not to support it, especially on a trial run.
Where's the multimodal facility that they would be going to in the Boothbay region? I mean, obviously, there's no facility.
Don't know. In fact, part of it, there have been some suggestions that maybe the shuttle itself could make a couple of stops, on the way. And maybe that's a possibility. That's something we're looking into. But as far as Boothbay Harbor, we don't know. Probably somewhere downtown, but wherever it would be, it would have to be the same location where people would pick up either one of the trolleys.
I think the place like a small mall where there's plenty of room would make the most sense, but of course, if you've got baggage, if you come into the Rock Tide to stay for a week, you don't want to move your bags a dozen times either, so that's for you to decide.
I'm sure one of our hotels in Boothbay Harbor would love them to get right off their terrace.
And the idea is people could come up on the train, but you could take a week. I mean, you could come to Boston and take it up, stay here for a week and come back. So, it could be a one-day thing, or it could be more days, depending on what people do. And then people from here can go down.
You could come to the chamber, and you've got that nice big building,
They
and
can
you
come
guys
to
could
the
do,
chamber if they
you
want.
guys could
I'm
do
happy
the
to do
luggage
that.
home.
Yeah.
Sounds like a business.
I can give them packing tips. I've traveled all over the world. I'm happy to do that. So,
Bob, I'm missing some money out of the match. So Lincoln County, the Chamber of Commerce, and Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission, 1,000 apiece.
Yes, 3,000 so far. If you were so good to approve it tonight, and then Boothbay Harbor next Monday, that would be 7,000. And we were talking to a couple of other of the tourist destinations to see if they'll contribute. So I feel comfortable that we'll make the match.
You're looking for $2,000?
Looking for $2,000. Yeah.
I'll make a motion that the town of Boothbay earmark $2,000 from the Selectmen's Contingency Fund to help out with this experiment.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded to earmark $2,000 from our selectmen's account.
Selectmen's Contingency Fund.
Any more discussion?
We have $2,000 in there, right, Jim?
Two now, I mean, ideally, I'd want to see July 1 tick around, and we have a new $2,000, but yes.
All those in favor?
Thank you very much.
And if we ever get to the point of drawdown, you work with municipal warrants all the time, we just need a little bit of notice to get it in the warrant.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you for coming on board.
Was that a pun?
No, of course not.
That was clever, Bill.
I am clever.
I not have to draw it off.
I want to see Brian with that in as a cold.
Everybody's on board.
Everybody's on, I like that.
Everybody's on
That's
board. And I feel
I will check on this.
Okay. Next up is going out of order a little bit, is a proposal for joint services with Edison. I'll leave it at that.
So I met with Stuart Smith, the selectman in the town of Edgecombe. We tossed this idea around very informally for like a year and a half or so, about sharing of code enforcement services. So I typed up a little short proposal kind of to pique everybody's curiosity, and I'll kind of go down through the specifics of it. Is essentially the town of Edgecombe currently employs a part-time code enforcement officer. It's about a 1/5 FTE. And I just guessed at that. I mean,
It's probably less than that.
it's probably less, yes. What I was trying to show is its comparison to what our full-time equivalent is. So we have 2 code enforcement officers because of our water district association. And essentially, if we were to absorb the code enforcement duties of the town of Edgecombe, it would be like 10% extra workload. So I think that the town of Boothbay can do that without any addition of salary and very little addition of extra resources. Some of the things that I point out in the proposal is that we would want to have all files, records, folders, information pertaining to zoning in Edgecombe here. So we essentially Edgecombe would have a satellite code enforcement office. All copies and things like that, it would be too hard to have 2 fee schedules. So I would ask that Edgecombe, we impose our fee schedule on theirs. It's pretty fair. I don't know what Edgecombe's fee schedule looks like, but I mean, we're talking about copies.
We normally do a buck a page.
Yeah, so we're probably cheaper actually, 25 cents and $1.
Oh, we're probably cheaper.
So the Edgecombe wins again. Edgecombe residents would utilize the code enforcement services on the same business schedule as the Boothbay residents, 9 to 4 right now, Monday through Friday, with notifications on deviations, holidays, closures, stuff like that. The town of Boothbay manager would continue to do all personnel responsibilities for the contracted code enforcement services. So complaints would come through me. Essentially, I'd have a rapport with the selectmen of Edgecombe like I have a rapport with the selectmen of Boothbay. But since they don't have a town manager, that's a new relationship. The Boothbay manager would make all decisions regarding pay, benefits, discipline, anything personnel really. And the Boothbay manager, and usually this falls to the department level, but still identifies priorities of the code enforcement office. So essentially, if there's an Edgecombe priority and a Boothbay priority, we're making that decision, not the elected officials. And we're going to do it in an equitable fashion, and when we have one that it appears inequitable, we'll talk with the elected officials. Boothbay will not provide planning board or board of selectmen support in general, like we do for our own services, but we will testify on request if the selectmen want us to talk about budgetary in an open meeting format, we'll go to that. If they want, the planning board wants to have, we'll go to that. But in general, we don't plan any administrative support, but in Boothbay, we do a lot of it. Chuck can probably attest to it. We do a lot of support of the planning board. What's this cost? And this is where we talk about the fire sale that we'd like to give Edgecombe, or at least what I'm proposing. The Boothbay town manager is proposing that the town of Boothbay offers these services kind of on a first-year trial basis, because there's a lot to learn. It's a first date, and we're gonna have to figure it out. So for that purposes, I'm proposing that the town of Edgecombe pays the town of Boothbay what they've been paying their previous code officer. $5,000 is the base rate, and they make about $7,000 in plumbing fees, which we would take in. $12,000 in total. And after that first trial year, the Boothbay Board of Selectmen and the Edgecombe Board of Selectmen would sit down and negotiate the second year of the contract. And you'd have very hard data that you can go by, which is comparable because you have the same code officers doing both towns. You know that apples match to apples. Edgecombe Selectmen understand that the price of services is expected to rise based on that data provided. I can envision 15,000 plus, but let's get to that second year and look at what that is really going to be. And the conclusion here is that the town of Edgecombe residents will benefit from a 5-day-a-week service, unparalleled to any service that they had in code enforcement to this date. The code enforcement officer is generally available by phone, email, or available for walk-in questions anytime. They will also enjoy quality services that come from having 2 code enforcement officers, which we enjoy right now. They share information, notes, and training. Applications and permits will be processed faster and more efficient, and that's no slight, it's just more people, less time. The town of Edgecombe Selectmen will enjoy periodic reporting and budgeted costs of services, where I'm not sure if you contracted with another employee, I don't think you get the same assurances you get from the town of Boothbay, which is responsible already to an elected body. The town of Boothbay residents and selectmen will enjoy a reduction in cost of code enforcement services and additional revenue stream. The economy of scale provided in the proposal will create a manageable new workload for the town of Boothbay code enforcement services without any additional needed services. And then the next step that I expect from this proposal is if the 2 governing bodies find this proposal interesting, a coordinated selectmen's meeting should be arranged, discuss the details of the arrangement and prepare a local agreement. So obviously, I'm just going out on a limb, and I'm not asserting that we like any part of this proposal. So far, this is just a conversation that Stuart and I have had.
And we used to share code enforcement and plumbing inspection for years. I know we went back, I think even before Steve Nichols. We also shared Mary Anderson for a while. Since I've been on the planning board and the selectmen, which is about 15 years, I think it's only been the last couple that we haven't shared, code enforcement and plumbing inspector. And I know from Edgecombe's standpoint, I've talked to the other selectmen in a meeting about this, and they like the idea, and they like the idea of doing this regionalization. We're already using your fuel depot down here for our fire department. Not all the time, but it does save us a little bit of money, and just helps you guys out too. But the other selectmen in Edgecombe are, I'll say, excited about it, because right now we have a code enforcement officer, but she's a town manager in another town, and sometimes we don't have the availability of that. And she's been great, don't get us wrong, we like her and we think her work is outstanding, but this would give us an opportunity to be able to have an opportunity for our residents to have some of those hours that they just don't have now.
I'm assuming you've had this conversation with her as well, so she won't.
She knows, and she said to us on numerous occasions, if you find, Marion took this job over as kind of a favor for us. She recommended someone to us when she took the Richmond job, and that person didn't work out. So she felt bad for us and took the job over. And she said, anytime you guys find a better opportunity or whatever, she's all for it. She's voiced her approval of us doing something like this. And
I'd assumed that you guys had already had that conversation, Stu. I just didn't
yeah,
want her to read the paper or see it on.
yeah. No, and well, actually, I think I've talked to her off and on. I think Jack Sarmanian, the selectman, just talked to her recently about it, and yeah, she's like, fine. She thinks it's great. No, and to be honest, I mean, she was doing us a favor the last few years, and kind of give her a break.
A couple of questions I have for you. Actually, 3. You say that plumbing fees the town of Boothbay would get to keep. What about if they adopt our fee schedule? How would you see building permit fees and all that? Where does that money go?
Well, that would have to be a discussion amongst the elected leaders about building permit fees. And honestly, we've talked about that second year. That second year, if we figure out we invested X amount of hours and it's going to cost about this much per hour, they might have to make an adjustment to their building permit fees in order to pay us. So we didn't want to dabble with that in year one, but it's a revenue source that the Edgecombe selectmen will have to consider.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is it leads me to my next 2 questions. One was you said little extra resources. What is the little extra resources?
I mean, paper. I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
You're not talking additional man.
And that's,
I mean, we have all the computers we need, we have all the staff we need, we have all the manuals we need. You don't, and that's the benefit of doing consolidation or regional services, is that they don't need the same manuals as we need, and obviously, they take advantage of the fact that Mary Anderson has all of that stuff. And they, you know, that's why it's hard to replace a code officer. You just hire somebody for like 8 hours a week, you know, they're gonna come with all the tools to get the job done. And that's why the relationship between town and town makes a lot of sense.
Now, for our code enforcement to go to Edgemont, does that mean we'd be paying them mileage?
We would have to pay the mileage.
Which is quite an expense, 52 cents a mile.
Yep, and I just, told 55 cents right now.
Okay.
We just worked out an arrangement with Dan, who does most of our site work, for an arrangement at the fuel depot, so he has an allotment. Ends up saving us $600 a year by paying him straight fuel and paying him the 55.5 cents a mile. And he can voluntarily agree to that, and we have a policy that states that that's permissible.
Well, if we do that, I mean, that's great, he's saving us money.
Yep.
But when he starts traveling to Edgemont, I mean, we know that that can go 10 miles one way, depending on where you go in Edgemont.
Right.
If we can arrange it that the fuel got charged to Edgemont, I would be much more comfortable with that. You've got an account with us already.
That's right.
So I'm just trying to, the last thing I want to do is stand before our taxpayers and even give them an inkling that it's costing us money.
Yeah, I mean, really the intent of the $12,000 that is the investment in the year is to make sure we don't take a hit. I don't want to lose money in year one. I don't really concerned about a $1-for-$1 replacement in the first year. I told Stuart that because I think it's really important for both of the elected officials to be able to say to their constituents, hey, we're trying this out. This could fail, and we reserve the right to walk away. But I have a feeling that after the first year, the Edgecombe residents are going to like our service. And I think the Boothbay residents are going to see the reward of another revenue stream.
I do think that makes it, I think we will take a hit with mileage. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't know. I mean, it don't take long at that kind of money to add up. I mean, 2 or 3 site visits and you're at $50. I mean, it's no time.
Well, we can probably work, we understand, we thought that we were gonna have to pay more for our code enforcement and home inspection. And we knew the day was coming where, you know, and we've been kind of readying ourselves to, and working that into our budget. So we know we're gonna have to take a hit. So if, you know, we wanna work out a deal where we pick up the fuel or something like that, I know that'll go over, you know,
I mean,
fine.
don't get me wrong, I don't want to make it sound like I'm
Yeah,
against it.
no,
but
no.
I mean, I think it's a great idea. It's just.
I mean, but if I was sitting in your seat, I would be asking that too.
I mean,
So-
shared services, if they're fine-tuned correctly, can be a win-win
Absolutely.
situation, or down, yeah.
And my intent by raising this proposal is to get the majority of this board and the majority of our board at the same table to discuss these. I consider fuel as a minor hurdle that we can get over. Edgecombe could plausibly say, hey, just put it on our Edgecombe fuel bill, and then they just pay it directly, and then in year 2, then you see how much fuel you use.
I mean, that's how we make the most sense.
Yep.
Put it on their fuel bill rather than bill mileage to them.
The hardest part there, and this is really trivial at this point, is that how does Dan realize how much fuel he uses in Edgecombe?
Right.
We'll figure that out.
In order to be really accurate, you have to do it in mileage
Yeah.
to find out what that first year's gonna be, but that, it's gonna be crazy trying to jot down every mile you go.
We can do logs. I mean, if for a year
Yeah.
to do logs, the reason why we do the fuel depot structure, it saves the town money. Dan doesn't have to log his miles, which is a pain in the butt for him.
Right.
So it works out for both parties. So, I mean, if we have to go back to a log for 1 year, so what?
Even if it's just for Edgemont,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, it'll be easier for him to do that way.
Well, if you've got to go to a site in Edgecombe to do an inspection, you could always just go to MapQuest or Google Maps to get a mileage real quick and put that right in the file.
Yeah.
So each time you have to do an inspection, I mean, you wouldn't have to keep track of
Mhm.
going there, I
Every
went
time.
there, here, and here, so it's X amount of miles.
Yeah, except for the fact that, you know, Dan is very responsive. He'll do weekend calls. I think your contractors are gonna love that. He sees the benefit of doing a 5-minute weekend call than piling it all up on Monday. So he does that out of his own free will. And if he's responding to an Edgecombe from Wiscasset, then, or if he's responding to an Edgecombe call from Ocean Point, but it's easily solved with a small log. We just write down, I gotta go to Edgecombe.
The way I'm a consultant, the way I run my business is my mileage from my office to wherever. If
Yeah.
I'm in Bangor and I have to go to Hamden, it's from my office to Hamden, it's not from Bangor to Hamden, so, we understand that kind of thing. If he's in Wiscasset and goes to someplace in Edgecombe, I think it's totally understandable to log his miles from Boothbay to Edgecombe.
Right. But if he's in Ocean Point, he shouldn't be figuring Ocean Point, he should be figuring his office.
And then you have to come back here.
Right.
Right. So I would
I
agree.
think it's a great opportunity to work together.
One more item while we're on there is that obviously when you open up to our summary page of our budget, that our increase of our budget for this year is $13,000, and we're talking about a new revenue source of $12,000. So that's,
And we're open to changing our fee structure for plumbing inspection. Well, we can talk about the building permits too, but, and we've talked about, we have an issue where we probably really should be looking at the fee structures on our plumbing inspections,
We went over ours 6 or 8 months ago. We really went over it a year ago. And we cut some, added some, but we tried to make it as user-friendly to the Joe homeowner that wants to put a new deck on their house. And we had a demolition, if you want to put a new deck on, we had a demolition fee, and that to me is ludicrous. So, we tried to make them as user-friendly as possible. I don't think that they're.
Well, I think we have a straight building.
yeah, where we have the square footage calculation, they don't.
Oh, wow.
But we have a per piece plumbing fee. So our plumbing fee is a lot more than the building permit. but-
That's something that can be worked out, really. That's all trivial.
Yeah, I could probably see us if, this all works, that we mirror Boothbay's. Just go that way. Or maybe even just reference Boothbay's.
Right.
Yeah, and we obviously want to be involved in the discussions. We're saying an elected official about a policy discussion, that's important, but we'll participate, staff will participate in saying, because we don't want to burden ourselves with administrative expense if trying to make a revenue that's only $12,000.
You could change all of your, if you wanted to change your building fees, or any of your fees, or go from what you're doing now to using, do you have to go to town meeting for any of that stuff?
Yeah, we do. And that's one of the changes that we're looking at doing in this town meeting, to make it so we don't have to go back to town meeting to change fees. Right now, they're all in our ordinance, so we have to go back to the legislative body to change them. But we're looking at breaking those out so we can change fees when it's needed.
So what are you looking at wanting to implement this?
So that's the funny thing that Lori asked me today. I said, I haven't actually had that conversation with Stuart, and I was thinking that it just depends on how long the conversation takes.
I could see it go after your town meeting, really.
Well, we've got financial constraints here. We'd probably have to go July 1, go fiscal year.
Which works well for us.
Yeah. So,
I am just curious, has staff been briefed on this, and do they feel comfortable with it?
Yeah, Dan participated in our meeting, and Lori and Dan have totally pitched in on this. They like the concept, and honestly, we think that we're showing off a little bit. I've told Stuart all my motivations. I would like to get another revenue stream. It makes code enforcement untouchable, because when you cut $1 out of code enforcement, you're not cutting $1, you're cutting 50 cents. And then also, I personally believe that we could do code enforcement for the entire peninsula with maybe 3 people rather than how many people are doing code enforcement on the peninsula now. So, I feel like I'm getting the conversation started by starting with Edgecombe.
Now, I think this is a great concept, and I look forward to working with Edgecombe, as I have in the past. But there are going to be some out there that are going to see a negative side to this. They're going to say that we've said that we need 2 people in the code office, and here we are farming them out to assist the municipality. How can we afford to do that if we need them here? How would you answer that?
Well, that's why I put the FTEs in there. We're talking about a 10% increase of workload. A 10% increase of workload, honestly, I probably continually have a 50% increase in workload that just never goes away. We think we can absorb a 10% increase in workload. We definitely have more work than one code enforcement officer. When you add the water district's demands, they give us money, but their demands push us over that one code enforcement officer. Are we two? We've had that debate here for quite a while, but we found a way to fund two without the cost of two. So we've been able to get two. So now we want to take advantage of the fact that we're theoretically overstaffed, even though we're not over budget. So that's my answer to that.
And, we're small, we're 1,300 people. I mean, I sent you the numbers on how many permits we had last year, I forget how many there were.
Yeah, and I can't recollect off the top of my head, but the hard part about that is taking his permits and putting them side by side on our permits. Now, we know how long it takes to administratively execute a permit for us, because we know our code. We don't know how long it takes to administratively execute a permit for them. So that's why that 1 year makes a lot of sense for us, is now we go into it and we say, their numbers compared to our numbers are very comparable, so we know exactly how much more work we're
What could be kind of an interesting side note out of this that may help us or it may help Edgecombe is Dan has your two codes, and all of a sudden he says to us, hey, geez, or says to the planning board, well, Edgecombe has this little tidbit in their ordinance that makes great sense, or vice versa.
Right.
We may be able to get the ultimate ordinance, if there is such a thing.
And we have looked at your ordinance in the past and made changes. We looked at a lot of them, Wiscasset and Damascotta and the Castle too.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think we book a meeting between the two boards.
Cool.
And maybe if you guys are okay with me coordinated with them, they have 3, we have 5, so we're probably the harder one to work with. So if you guys have a consensus, we can set up a meeting.
What nights work best for you folks?
Gee, this Wednesday night's awful nice. Well, we meet on Mondays. We meet every other Monday. So like we have a selectmen's meeting coming up this Monday. So every 2 weeks. But other than that, probably this Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesdays are good for your board. Couldn't we meet
Early?
early, prior to our meetings?
And we kind of consistently do that through the budget season, yeah.
Yeah.
If our next meeting, is that too soon?
No.
That's February 12th.
Yeah, ask Chuck how quick I can put together an interlocal agreement, it's pretty darn fast. And that's, I was gonna use the excuse that I didn't want to be presumptuous, and that's why I didn't give you an interlocal agreement for a draft. The truth is, I just didn't have enough time.
Yeah, February 12th's not gonna work.
No?
No.
But
Well, we put that last one together in half an hour.
But you guys have another meeting on the 26th, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
That one could probably work.
Meet an hour early.
Yeah, 26 at 6 o'clock.
I'll ask the other two.
If it doesn't work, we don't have to do Wednesday nights,
Yeah. Well, see, for us, for you wouldn't have to do anything, but we have to advertise it and, put the notice out there, make everyone know that we're meeting. And probably, I would think the best location would be here.
Yeah,
Well, if it's before our regular meeting, that would be convenient for us.
That,
It would also, if there's anybody that hasn't been in the town office, it kind of gives them an idea to see the calendar.
good idea, yeah, right. Okay.
If you have inquisitive residents too that wanted to come down, some,
Well, trust me, we advertise we're meeting here, there'll be residents here. So,
You're not gonna bring a troublemaker with
When's your next meeting?
it's Monday.
Do you want me to attend your meeting for?
If you'd like, yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, we actually have a meeting here. We have comp.
We meet at 6 o'clock.
What we meet at 6 o'clock.
Do you? Well, then we have another meeting on the 10th.
I'll touch base with you.
Okay.
How is Mark's health?
He's fine. And he was here Tuesday, to have a meeting. Monday and then a week from Monday to try to get back on track.
If you want to go to that one, I'll just take notes for it.
Okay, excellent. Perfect, problem solved.
We'll multitask.
I got a quick question. Would this arrangement require voter approval?
An interlocal agreement would not require town meeting approval, except for you couldn't do it on a multi-year basis. You'd have to renew annually. So the selectmen have the authority to do contracts for a year.
It's really no different than like allowing another town to use our fuel depot. We charge them, we make a little money on it. And it's kind of the same thing, that we're charging them for services.
Yeah.
So if we can lower our budget, I think it's a great idea.
Unless it was a multi-year contract.
Yeah, if it was a multi-year contract, you'd have to definitely take it to town meeting, and then you'd have to bring it to two town meetings. And you know, financially and administratively, the way we're gonna handle this, the same way we handle the deal with the water district. Sorry, I point to you because I affiliate you with the water district. We essentially expense everything we expense out of that budget, and we take the payment from the water district and we reimburse the expense. So when the auditor sees, he sees the expense, he sees the money come back in, and that's why I represent it in the budget that way. So you can see, we really need this much money, but we're gonna make this much money. Instead of logging it like a straight revenue, I log it as a reimbursement of expense.
I look forward to it. It's great. Anything else?
I look forward to sitting down.
Awesome, me too. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So Jim has asked that we put the budget to the end, so we will. So next will be reports.
Okay. First report that I'd like to cover is you have the IDK Communications Report. That's the report that the Board of Appeals requested for the cell tower application. I simply just want to make a formal note that you have it, that it's a public document, that anybody else can have it. I'd be surprised if the people that want it don't have it all by now. But then I also want to recommend to you that we don't comment on it right now. It's obviously available, you obviously have the freedom to comment on it, but it could complicate the Board of Appeals process, similar to the Board of Appeals that we've had in the past.
And then
So
meetings when?
that means it's the 28th.
Tuesday.
This Tuesday? What time is it?
28th at 7 p.m.
28th, yeah. So the expert that did this report will be there to testify to the Board of Appeals and give more information. Any questions? Continuing on, the Lincoln County budget, I put in your packet some correspondence between John O'Connell, the Lincoln County Administrator, and myself. I'm just trying to be transparent. The last meeting I reported that the Lincoln County budget was a 5% increase. Well, it's a 5% increase budget to actual appropriation from last year. And you see in the correspondence between me and John, John's explaining that when they do their audit, they'll see how much surplus is available to reduce the tax levy. So it may be less than 5%. But at this point in time, we'd be facing a 5% increase. So just for clarity in my statements.
Hey, Jim, I see that they say February 26th would work.
Yes,
Come on.
that's correct. So Commissioner Reserve wasn't available, so yeah, if you would like to still meet with the commissioner, he'd be available on the 26th if you'd like me to set that up.
I think it's really about it. I'd like to have all three of them here, but our representative and John would be fine, but I don't think it's asking too much to have all three. That's my personal opinion, with you guys.
If you have 2 of the 3 here, then it's an official meeting for them, just like it'd be for 3 of us.
That would be okay, in my opinion. Because I did talk to one of the commissioners the other day outside, and they do offer health insurance for their commissioners. They meet twice a month like we do. To offer full medical coverage for people that meet twice a month is ludicrous, in my opinion. So I'd like to know why. And I'd like to have all three of them sitting there because, the response I got was, that's a great question. Well,
That's the answer.
I mean, if the residents ask us a question, we're expected to have a response. So I'd like to have all of them, because that's, unless you guys don't think that's appropriate. I didn't get the answer that we had talked about last meeting about if they're there for 10 years or more, if they get it for life. Didn't know that answer. So it'd be interesting to see the commissioner's budget, at least that portion. I don't begrudge any full-time employee benefits, but to meet a couple hours every 2 weeks and get full medical coverage, plus life insurance, plus a salary, makes no sense.
I'll extend the invitation.
The Lincoln County Board of Commissioners.
Yeah, what you done commissioners?
Wow, I'm gonna.
See, I bet you didn't know that.
That's an eye-opener, isn't it?
And they're thanking you too.
What's that?
They thank the town of Edgecombe for contributing to that too. That just bugs me, you know, I mean, in this day and age, we're cutting our employees' health insurance, not cutting, I don't want to use that, but changing coverage because it's so expensive for full-time employees. And we're offering it to people that meet twice a month. I mean, that makes no sense. Yeah, I mean, we all know what healthcare costs.
Well,
It isn't cheap.
The example set by the senators and the congressman.
No, sure. County just jumped
We can
on.
get
Yeah, but at least
we can
the
get away with it,
senators
let's do it.
At least the senators and congressmen get together more than twice a month.
It just goes back to Dan's argument, they should be abolished.
And it's
It's a historical premise.
We need
I mean, the response I got,
Yeah.
really, I mean, the response that I got was, I said, "Don't you find that a little odd?" And he said, "Well, they were probably discussing it, just threw it in." Okay. Well, let's throw it out.
County politics is a lot different than local or state politics. You have to convince one person to agree with you. It's a majority of two. And probably the historical premise comes from the fact that before Maine is way behind the times in county government, and it probably stems before they had administrators at the county level, and there was a lot of work done by county commissioners. But obviously, it's still not the case. That's not the case now. There is an administrator.
I just want to be clear. I don't want to downplay the work that they do. I mean, I'm sure they have a lot on their plate, but there's a limit to the tax dollar. I mean, we know that. We hear it every year.
This way, they meet twice a month.
That's right. And I couldn't comprehend that. Could you imagine going to town meeting with a line item in the selectmen's budget? There's 5 of us, full family plans,
That's
you're talking 100 grand
100 grand.
minimum. Could you imagine?
And they don't have to get any approval but their own.
No, 3 people gets to vote on it. And 2 out of 3 have to agree.
And even still, 60,000 is a lot smaller.
They have a budget committee that was just put on that this year. And what we vote on and what we recommend, it's just a consideration. They don't have to
We've been
go.
on it a
I
while.
served on it.
Yeah.
Oh, have you?
But has that ever
You
been
guys know
mentioned?
that.
During the budget meetings, did you sit through a whole budget cycle?
Yeah, this time.
You have. Was it ever once mentioned that they get full medical insurance?
No.
No,
not
It's
once.
probably hidden into the cost somewhere, like their life insurance, like their salary. I don't know what they get paid a year. I have no idea. I'm sure it's probably 50 grand. I don't know.
I heard it 10.
Well, even then, you know, I mean, if they didn't get anything else, I wouldn't argue that. I might, well, yeah, I would, because I love to argue, but. Okay, sorry. my
I'll
brain-
extend the invitation. Boothbay Regional Land Trust, the Cross River property, I met with Nick Ulo. I hope I say his name right. Ulo. I just call him Nick when you get there. We kind of talked about a lot of the discussions and kind of about the compromises of our boards and how do we get them in a room, and it was more with the logistics. So we want to recommend that you guys meet on, the date that we were just proposing, on February 12th at probably before meeting, 6 o'clock is what I would recommend. We need to have a conversation between the two bodies before we can even have a vote. Because, I mean, honestly, I think right now, I don't even have a feel for what our board feels. We gotta have a more intimate conversation. So I'm recommending a workshop at 6 o'clock on the 12th, and I wanted to see if that was okay with you guys. Obviously, the workshop would be open to the public, but I think we don't get these invasive public people who really do the workshop. Excellent.
That's not the executive session under negotiations?
You could, I'll look it up. You might be onto something there.
That would take care of these invasive people.
I mean, this may end up in a purchase and sale agreement,
Right.
so that it could easily be stretched to say that that is the start of an agreement, or start of a negotiation.
And if we're gonna have a P&S and we have to have discussions with our attorney.
Yeah, and I honestly haven't gone that far, because I'm not sure I understand all of this yet. So I need that meeting before I even draft up the purchase and sale. And I mean, there's gonna be little things like there might be a dollar transaction needed, which is small. I even told Nick I'd give him $1.
I almost think that it would be pertinent after we meet with them, for us to meet by ourselves. I just don't wanna, you know what I mean? I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, if we're talking, if Chuck is right, which I think he is, and you go into an executive session for negotiations, you obviously have the ability to discuss your strategy of the negotiations in private.
I think that's, you know what I mean, and make sure everyone's on the same page, or at least it's been heard.
I'll have the answer on the executive session tomorrow morning. Any other questions on the land trust? MDOT River Road ledge removal, you see in your packets that we just got correspondence from MDOT telling us that there's going to be some major ledge removal on River Road. You probably get the same correspondence. It'd probably be a little invasive for the people that work down there, so we wanted to make sure everybody heard about it. And it was also pretty flattering getting correspondence from MDOT that they were going to do a project. So.
Yeah, right.
Your road's gonna soar.
That's what I thought. I think I said, you're gonna do something.
Department heads did not meet today because I was at Augusta. I did touch base with all of them, and essentially it's pretty vanilla. The business office is dealing with kind of still finishing up end of year stuff, still doing some of the tax foreclosure of dogs. This is their quiet year, even though it's my busier time of year. On that topic, and I didn't have this information until just before the meeting, we sent all of our lien foreclosure information to the attorney to check the background on them, and we've got the go-ahead. The next step would be to send 45-day notices for the property owners to reclaim their property. After they don't reclaim their property, the selectmen have the green light to do whatever you want. It would be my recommendation to send the 45-day reclamation notice to everybody, even if you're on the fence about claiming one of those.
I mean, we've passed precedents, you can't.
Yeah.
No, we should send out the notices, but I think the admin code gives them right up until the last second to reclaim their property.
Right.
The admin code has language, this is a statute.
Yes.
Yeah, so we want to get that 45-day statutory obligation out of the way. So once you're out of the way, then you're just dealing with, yeah, we have in-house rules. The Public Works has actually just been tinkering. They've been trying to get all the trucks back to work. Code enforcement is got a few things in the mix. They're working with the planning board and the Board of Appeals. Board of Appeals had a meeting recently and one coming up, and they do administrative support for that as well. So they've been a little busy doing that, but not hair on fire kind of business. I touched base with Mike O'Donnell, our assessor, too, just via email, and really nothing to report that's new. Wrapping things up, he's pretty excited about the fact that their spring work's done and they're just Methodist in spot work, and I'm pretty excited about that too. The last thing that I wanted to cover, and I was going to put this in a memo, but I ran out of time. The AV website proposal that we're working on. I had a discussion with John Trees from Channel 7, and we brought in Sam Michael, who's our electrician for the town, to discuss kind of the parameters here. And, you know, honestly, a lot of the things that we're discussing are still really soft. But we are very confident that we can pull this off within that $10,000 budget. And what I was gonna propose in the memo was essentially a soft budget of $2,000 for cameras, $2,000 for mics, but it was just an overall budget. We're very confident we can pull off a product for under 10 grand. We just wanna know, do we have permission to really start shopping?
I think we already approved that months ago.
I think I said I'd come back with more clarity on it.
But I mean, we had allotted 10,000 for that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
So
I mean, essentially,
I would say get it done.
the reason why I want to be just very clear with you guys about the permission to go ahead is we're gonna single source wiring to Sam. I mean, he gives us a great rate. We're not gonna put it out to bid because we'd spend more time specking it out to put out a bid than we would actually do in the wire.
Well, it's also piecemeal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you would be pretty hard pressed to bid out this and then bid, you'd have 4 or 5 different bids going on. Because I assume you're gonna buy a flat screen TV.
We might do that outside of the project. We haven't decided yet, but that's one of the places we could save money. I just talked with Sam about it this morning, and that's why I have a hard time writing down exactly what we're gonna buy. Because, I mean, honestly, if we could pull it off for under 10 grand and the TV's the thing, then we cut it out, you know?
I mean, we have a Sam's Club account, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's probably the cheapest place to buy a big screen.
Now, just to follow up on a conversation that you and I had via email, we're gonna have the equipment. Channel 7 is still gonna be doing all the recording, and they're the ones that own the product, so to speak, and we'll just link to that.
Correct.
That way, we don't have to keep the minutes as a visual record.
Right. So if the town is producing the video, we are obligated for that record for indefinitely. If Channel 7 produces the record, they're as responsible to the people they serve. I'm not sure I can answer that for Channel 7, but essentially our obligation is severe. So the idea would be the production of everything would be done by Channel 7 on our equipment. And then we share the product.
So the last thing we need is
Right.
another server.
Right. Well, I guess, I mean, as long as that will pass the straight face test, I mean, even if we had to buy the equipment and turn it over to Channel 7, the assumption it stays with the thing that it stays here, I mean, you get the same thing. I just don't know if it's our equipment, if you can make that stretch. I don't know that yet, so that's something that you.
That was something you and I talked about as well, and you said that even though it's our equipment, they're using it.
That's correct. Yeah,
So, let me play devil's advocate here. John doesn't show up one night, our equipment's all sitting here, we don't kick it on if John don't show up.
no, we'll maintain that record, and we're okay with doing it sporadically. But, you know, maybe those are things we can figure out with volunteerism, you know. Maybe John can get a volunteer that night to turn it on, and we'll figure it out.
Maybe that volunteer might work for the register.
Maybe that volunteer works for the register. Maybe I
Get a helicopter drone, floating there.
Maybe I start volunteering for Channel 7 sporadically in my off time. You know, so we're
You
doing.
have off time for the office to hear.
I go home and eat and stuff like that when I'm not here.
You're blowing that line.
You know, and essentially, if we do it the way we think we're gonna, and we end up putting that video on YouTube and then linking it to the website, it's there forever anyway. That's all I have for reports.
So we'll go to old business, which you're up first here with the garage.
I was waiting for you to jump up and out of the gallery and stay here. Well, we met, we had 2 interviews prior to this meeting at 6 o'clock tonight. We had 2 interesting candidates that were looking to sit on the budget committee for BRA's, Boothbay Selectmen Service. I think there was a consensus met. At this point now, this would have to be an actual motion, correct, Jim?
Yes.
So we had 2 people, maybe just write his name right, Nathaniel F. Leonard and David Pratt were both interested in sitting on that board. I believe there was a consensus made here tonight that we are going to actually try to make an appointment this evening. I'll entertain a motion for Nathaniel F. Leonard to be appointed to the budget committee of the Boothbay General Service.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion?
I would like to say that both candidates were qualified and that they were two good interviews.
Yeah, and if you weren't gonna say it, I was gonna say thanks to Dave for showing interest. It's nice to see people that are actually interested to come and sit on our boards anyway, in any capacity, so. But they were both strong candidates, but this board feels that Nathaniel Frosty, just to keep that clear, was the stronger candidate for today. So with no further discussion, all those in favor? And Steve?
Abstain.
Thank you.
I was not part of the
Yes, he was not part of the interview process.
interview process, I didn't come in.
I've already got that.
Okay. I guess, as long as that's sufficient.
He's clarifying for the press.
That's right.
So is there 3 representatives now? There's one from each town that's going to be appointed to the BRAS board?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
From what we understand is right now, yes, the Browns is looking for an appointment from Boothbay Harbor, and Southport.
Okay.
And that hasn't taken effect yet. It's to be voted on by the BRAS membership in 3 weeks.
This is technically just the budget committee right
Right,
now.
this is just budget. We still can, fine. Boothbay Harbor and Southport.
Budget
Right.
committee appointment.
Right.
I think it's your intention to take that same person and use for appointments.
Right.
It's this board's intention, I just don't know what Boothbay Harbor and Southport is.
Next up is the tax increment financing development plan, otherwise known as TIP.
Yeah, it's camouflage when I write it all the way out. So I handed out to you a spreadsheet that looks like this, that may be a little bit gibberish to you. It's from left to right, map, lot, acreage, the total bill-in value, so the assessed value, I don't know why they're writing bill-in. Book and page, name of the property owner, their actual physical address, and then I guess it goes back into map lot again, but that's just a product of vision. My calculator died and my iPad died and my phone died, so I don't have the ability to do math on the fly right now. I need to figure out what 2% of the total, if you take the total acreage and try to figure out what 2% is, but we need to get it down. You can see right now we're at 2.72%. We need to weed a little bit. And ordinarily I've done this for you guys in the past, but we're doing this process transparently, publicly in the spotlight, so I decided not to do that for you. There's an easy 20 acres, I think, at the top, R4164, which is the town of Boothbay on Back River Road. I think that's additional acreage that goes in association with the playground. But you can see the playground's down there later. Clifford Playground. It actually looks.
That's identical, Jim. And it's the same
Nice.
one.
Oh, so that's a glitch within vision, actually. So, well, we just weeded out 20.18 acres. Does anybody have a calculator on their
Yeah,
phone?
2%,
My phone.
2% is 272.28. 272.28 is what 2% of
So we got
13,614 is.
acres off this.
We're gonna trim a lot, and I thought that, I mean, we don't have to do this all in open session, but I want you to see it's essentially not easy, and that's why we trimmed off public properties before, because we felt that the TIF law allows us to make expenditures on those public properties anyway. It's a little bit it's a bigger stretch. So this is what I was trying to tell you in our TIF workshop, is that that's why we didn't have Clifford Playground on there before, is because if you can make the assumption, why include it as part of your collection?
Jim, why would we have an Ocean Point Road in that TIF district? That would be the R7059.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 17.77 acres.
R7,
It's about 2/3 of the way down the page.
Ocean Point Road.
And so,
And so,
yeah, that's on Route 96.
Yeah.
How does that anymore?
Good question.
Well, there's 37 acres now.
Excellent, we're getting close.
almost 38.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you take the refuse in the town of
Yeah,
Boothbay,
that's almost
Public
38
Works,
acres.
there's another 10 right there.
Well, that's why I wanted to take these out anyway. I think we can eliminate all the town properties out of the TIF zone. And there's not gonna be any incremental new value. And if you can already use the TIF revenues in there, then they're obsolescent in my opinion. So, I mean, I think if we took out all the town properties, we could get this under 2% again. But obviously.
Ask this question too,
Yes, sir.
just something I had to think of. If the public works plot is in there, and the town of Boothbay needs a new salt shed, could that money come out of TIF funds then rather than capital?
You could make that excuse even if it wasn't part of the TIF though, because you,
Either way, I can do it. Yeah, essentially because it's gonna provide service to the TIF zone.
Right.
We get a new firehouse.
Yeah, Edcom knows a thing or two about this too. You know, so my recommendation would be to eliminate the public properties out of here. I know we talked about it in the workshop, and I know it probably would sell to the people. They would say, you can use that money in there, but honestly, you could still use that money in there.
So we're right back to removing all the town property, including the Clippers by now, correct?
That's what I
Well,
would.
remove it once.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the only thing different I noticed between those, the map and law, one has an O164, and the other one's just
Yeah.
164.
What we did was a data dump, so the
Right.
truth of the matter is, Mike might have flagged one as a real account and one as a copy account, and when we dumped it out, it didn't tell us the difference.
there's 72, just like that. So,
Yeah.
we're close at that point.
If you pull out the town properties, pull out the ambulance service, I don't see any, I instructed Lori to pull out, originally in this data, in this sheet, were also land trusts, we already pulled those out. I'm sorry if that was a bad assumption, but thought it it made sense to me.
We're 3/4 of the way there, at least, just taking out town properties.
Yeah. As long as you guys are confident when we go to the voters that we can explain to them that just because it's not within the TIF fund doesn't mean you can't expend TIF revenues in it.
I don't know, you could serve that 2 pieces of property.
It might just be.
The house,
Oh, that's right.
that would be 2 separate, you know.
You want me to rough that up and
Please.
if it comes under 2%, I'm gonna send this off to Ron for legal review and then we're a step closer. All right?
Okay.
Alright. Next up is the policy on administrative appointed boards and committees.
So I roughed up what I heard at the last meeting, and honestly, I was just taking a leaner. And I threw in some language based on the conversation we had at our last meeting on this policy. We had a little bit of dialogue through email, which I just recommended that we talk about it more here. But obviously through that dialogue, there has to be a change to an administrative code if you like this policy. I mean, we're obviously also in line with bringing things to town meetings, so if you want to make adjustments to the administrative code, you have that ability.
As I said last meeting, I still think we should have that ability. I still think it should be on most standing committees without any exceptional rule that they have to be a resident of Boothbay. But in, some instances, we should, this board, whether it be us or another 5 guys sitting here, should be able to say we can have a committee made of Boothbay and non-Boothbay members, but not just as a rule of thumb that anybody can sit on one of our boards. And certainly not, I mean, you can put in exceptions, planning board, board of selectmen, those boards are gonna have to have town Boothbay residents sit there.
really, it'd only be an ad hoc committee would be the only thing that you would ever want.
And if we have to specify an ad hoc committee, that's fine, but I'm just saying. And I'm not saying all ad hoc committees would,
Once every 10 or 15, 20 years that there would ever be a case where you'd want a non-resident on there, probably.
If you're dealing with something that has regional implications, and I respect your opinion, we disagree with it.
I understand.
Non-residents shouldn't serve on town committees, period. If there's something that we've got going that has regional implications, we've already shown that it can work by putting together an interlocal agreement and having representatives from each one of those towns sit together. We did it with the task force for St. Andrews. We had a representative from the Harbor, Southport, Boothbay, and Boothbay Harbor.
And that's,
And it's,
What did I say, the Harbor twice? Yeah, we definitely had this go. But that wasn't a town committee, that was a regional board that was put together to look at a regional issue. Things like that can be done. We don't need to put non-residents on Boothbay boards.
How would you have a regional committee say if that TIF thing would have went through in Bond? Perfect example. That's why I go back to the every 15, 20 years. That probably won't come up again for another 20, 30 years. But if it did, you wouldn't want a regional committee designing a rotary or whatever traffic flow you put through there. You see what I mean?
While there are implications to people going through there, it's still in the town of Boothbay.
Right.
People that aren't residents can sit in the audience and give their thoughts to the board. I mean, that's done now.
yeah.
So they don't necessarily need to sit on that board to let their thoughts be heard. We really don't need to appoint non-residents to Boothbay boards.
I'm fine, I'm not.
I just putting it that way, I wouldn't disagree with you.
My only thing is we had quite a debate going here for a committee, when we're saying we can put together interlocal boards, and that's fine, but we can't have a committee that has a couple of non-residents sit on it too. And it just, to me, it's, you're very much splitting hairs at that point in time. But I'm perfectly okay with people being welcome to come into our boards and voice opinions, yes.
Now, does our code specify voting or?
Both. You must be a voter in the town of Boothbay to sit on a board, and you must be a resident for at least 6 months of the year.
Now see, that could be, in my opinion, where you change, because a summer resident could have input. Now, when I say summer resident, a tax-paying resident could have, who knows, if we would ever discuss building a flea market location somewhere, I don't know, something, you do, farm stand. You know what I mean? Kind of like what they could have, that, it's their tax dollars too. Now, I'm not saying that they should be able to sit on a planning board or any board, like a selectman or anything, but something that could do with a project that would benefit them in the summer. It's their tax dollars being spent, why shouldn't they sit?
If they're here only 6 months out of the year, then they're technically a Boothbay resident anyway, unless they're claiming.
No, but I'm talking even if they're here for 3 months. They pay the same as you or I. Why shouldn't they have that say? I'm asking that question because now's the time to ask that question. That's why I'm asking it. I guess what was the thought process, I wonder, of why that wasn't in there to begin with?
I think the thought process behind that when it was put in there is the fact that the folks that are living here year-round
They're keeping
are the ones that
Right.
And I agree with
it affects
that.
more.
I agree with that totally, but there's certain cases, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, where a committee, now I'm not, again, no boards, I'm not talking boards, I'm talking an actual committee. If you had a beautification of the common committee, I could see where you could have the benefit of having a very talented, we get some very talented people that live in this area in the summertime. Now I keep that.
There's nothing to say that that beautification committee that you're talking about can't get together with a summer resident and say, hey, can we use you for your technical expertise in helping us with this
But why
project?
shouldn't they have a say? If they have $1 million home on the waterfront, they're paying $4, $5, $6 grand a year. Why shouldn't they have a say in that?
if you've got a board that's bringing somebody in for their technical expertise, then they're working with that board.
But they don't
The
have a
board has the ultimate decision to make the recommendation to the next step.
The board of selectmen, you mean?
No, if you put together a beautification committee, they'd end up having to come to us to take it to town meeting.
And that's where,
But the residents have said they want year-round residents on boards.
And on boards, I think they need year-round residents.
Well, it also applies to ad hoc committees, because ad hoc committees are also covered in 3.3 of the administrative code.
I don't know, he's been trying to add in the question.
You know, and take it with what you will, we often invite people to be like special advisors on the boards that aren't residents. We got one going right now in our works review committee. We've asked a consultant from Wiscasset to sit on it. Doesn't vote, but he inputs on the board and everything else. I'm sorry?
The advisory.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, but we have the same kind of criteria that we have Edgecombe residents on our boards. Unless one time we created an ad hoc committee to look at our waterfront, and we had a person that owned land, waterfront property, wasn't a resident of Edgecombe, was there for probably 5 months out of the year, but we invited him to be on that board and advise us.
so you can't,
Yes, but
But-
he wasn't voting, he was an advisor.
He was an advisor.
And there's nothing in the admin code that says you can't invite somebody to serve as an advisor.
So he can't vote, he can't vote.
So you need, indicate we need it too.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not gonna continue this, I mean, to me, it's a beating a dead horse, but I mean, the reality of it is, I just remember having a long discussion about trying to get a mixed group of people into this from different areas. So we were trying to figure out a way to make that happen. Now, at this point in time, we're saying that we can make it happen all the time, well, that's fine, I'm certainly okay. I just think Boothbay should always be out front in making things more community friendly. And I'm not saying take any power away from the residents of Boothbay. It's a committee, an ad hoc committee, that recommend to a different board that then in turn makes a decision. All I'm saying is to swing the doors open a little bit and says that we actually welcome other people's opinion. And we do that now, we prove it almost every Wednesday night in this meeting. So I'm okay with just leaving it the way it is, but, I mean, like I said, I can remember several heated debates on making sure that this could happen, so if we're gonna have to open up the administrative code to put in one little exemption that says if we want to, we can, I'm willing to do so, but if it's not necessary, then it's not necessary.
You can always put advisors.
Okay?
What about the section that relates to full-time staff? This is the first town I've worked in that had a prohibition versus full-time staff working in a capacity on a committee. There are lots of good reasons why you want to have full-time staff. We toyed with the idea when we were putting together the comprehensive planning committee, and I had even gone as far as to ask Bonnie if she would commit time to it. She's a 25-year clerk, she brings a lot to the table. Should she have an equitable vote? Yeah, I mean, in that case, it makes sense. Also when you have building committees, you want your manager involved and you're good at building committees, and not just advisory in nature, you want them to have a little bit of authority. If we put together a committee to advise the 2 selectmen on an interlocal agreement for code enforcement, and the board got involved at that committee level, you still make the final decision, but the committee's empowered to put together the agreement that is finally voted on. Lori could not be that person for us. And luckily, we could go to Dan in that case. But I'm just saying there is a case to be made for it, and while we're on the topic.
They can still be used as advisors, they just can't have a vote to push everything forward. They can put their opinion out there just like anybody else. Here's what I think. If people agree with them, then they'll agree with them. If they don't, then they don't. But they can still have their technical expertise out there and give their advice using Lori in her position. They just can't serve on the committee.
I mean, the reason why I brought it up is because I really did think the comprehensive planning committee was a loss that we didn't have staff with an equitable vote. Do I sit and participate? Sure. But would I even make a good appointee for a comp plan? No, absolutely not. I'm good at being the town manager and being a task manager for the board. But a 25-year employee of the town, that's, especially as a clerk, that knows ins and outs of lots of things, I think that was a loss. I think we were prohibited by policy. And that's one of those times that maybe it would have been convenient.
Well, we're prohibited by policy to have them sitting on the board and having a vote. We're not prohibited by policy from having them there for their advice, as an advisor using their technical expertise.
But you don't think in that particular instance, that very particular instance, that someone like Bonnie wouldn't want to commit to a process like that if they just didn't have any equity in their say? You know, because you participate in the comprehensive planning committee. You got 13 people that agree on different things, and if you voice agreement to the minority on there, and you could have been the side and swing vote, don't you feel like you missed out a little bit on that, on the ability to push a topic? I would. But I certainly respect your opinion on this, and this is a policy that's made by you guys. I'm being the devil's advocate in this case.
And again, I'm just me thinking outside, just thinking out loud again, is where's the detriment for an employee to sit on a committee? I mean, I'm not gonna, me personally anyway, maybe this is where it gets very particular. I'm not gonna appoint an employee on the board that might have anything to do with the outcome of their job, you know what I mean? So, but I guess if you had a board of selectmen that didn't have quite the scruples, I guess you could appoint an employee that could potentially have an impact on their job somehow. But I mean, I don't see where that has I don't see where there's an impact.
Going back to that, though, they would still have to meet the requirements of being a resident of the town of Boothbay.
Yeah, and in this case, and I'll have to apologize for using Bonnie's name so many times to her tomorrow, is that she's a resident, a voter. She executes all of our elections. I couldn't think of a better person that if she weren't prohibited by policy to be on the comp plan committee. And the fact that she committed to it, I was excited, and I was like, oh crap, the policy.
I do have to ask one stupid question probably, but if you was to appoint an employee on a committee, if you appoint, that's telling them they're going to be there because they're an employee at that point. And if you're telling them they got to be there, do you have to pay them? You know how many hours you spend at that comp plan? That would cost the town a fortune.
There's a couple of answers to that. You probably would be required by Fair Labor Standards Act to pay them. But they could also agree to not be paid as long as you have the agreement in writing. And you know, that's a concession that some employees would make for a document that's going to last 20 years in their town. Yeah.
Could you work on an agreement before the appointment was made?
Certainly. You can make it a condition of the appointment. I mean, so if you really want to do this, then we can't be logging the overtime. But honestly, you've heard me in my mantra about the comprehensive plan. It's so important to me that we get a comprehensive plan that the voters approve of, that we can use as the grassroots for the future. If Bonnie wanted to put in 2 hours or 4 hours a month, I'd find a way to comp it out. I mean, that's, like cut her 4 hours here and there out of a month. So, I mean, it's not unfeasible for her.
I'm not opposed to having an employee as long as they meet the requirements of later in, being a resident for 6 months and stuff. Because then you can go back to the same argument if they're not. Why should someone that's not a voter here have a say on any committee?
And once again, historical reference is probably, like in that particular case, I'd make a bad appointment. I meet the requirements. I live in town. I'm a registered voter. I didn't vote for any of you guys. But I would make a bad appointment to the comprehensive planning committee. I got hired from away, so you want somebody that's been here and has a history in mind.
Chuck, when was the last, was you either on the Board of Selectmen or on the planning board the last comp plan?
1989.
comp plan? No.
When was that done?
1989.
Oh, okay.
I I've been around a while, it's not that long.
No, well, I thought it was around 2000. Well, the reason why I asked that question is it would be interesting to know that someone like Joan Ripper, I find it hard to believe she wasn't on that, as active as she was in the community.
And the clerk.
And the clerk. I would be willing to bet back then she was on that committee.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, we didn't have half the rules and statutes we had to follow or anything back then that you do now, obviously, but still.
Well, you know, we're actually trying to perfect something that can't be perfect.
I mean, I think if you was gonna build a new public works building tomorrow, I think it'd be ludicrous to say that you wasn't gonna have your public works foreman on that committee.
Technical expertise, he's a technical advisor.
He should have a say in it though, too. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if it's a 5-man crew, and he should have that say, because technically, even if he has that say and he votes against it, he's not voting to appropriate that money. He's just voting to advise to the Board of Selectmen, who have to then put it to the voters.
How's that any different than the fire department when they come to us and say they want a new fire truck? They don't, the firemen look at what they want, and then they bring it to the Board of Selectmen.
Be no different.
You didn't create that committee for
Right.
advice. They
Right.
created their own.
They voted to bring it to us, and then we have to vote to bring it to the, so there's so much checks and balances already that there's never any chance of an employee making decisions harming anything, really, because it's still got to come through the Board of Selectmen, which are residents, and then it's got to go before the voters on top of that, really, for anything significant at all.
Hiring committees are the classic trip up in these things. If you were hiring a town manager, who brings better advice to the board than the people that have worked with the previous manager about personality, skill set, things like that. So lots of towns appoint hiring committees to, and the hiring committee doesn't hire. They put out a final report that goes to the selectmen, but I mean, essentially the final report is democratically decided.
I mean, if we were going to hire someone in the office tomorrow, how could you not have a committee without Tracy sitting there? Really? I mean, I would value her input.
For her advice.
Right.
Keep going back to advice. Advice is okay, but God forbid you.
The thing is you're putting, at that point, you got to have a committee of 3 people, and I just couldn't, or 1 person, to have an odd number. I couldn't imagine not having a part of that, could you? I mean, is it just me?
No, but it's not. I can't see where there's any harm in it. I just can't.
No, not if it was a direct approval of
There's
a
too many
project.
places to catch.
Right, I think any committee is fine. I think any board, obviously, is not fine.
Right, there's a reason they're not on boards.
Them committees are appointed by the selectmen. So,
This is statutory prohibition versus employees being on.
Right, I mean, but there's legal and understandable reasons why that's not allowed. But I can't, for the life of me, figure out a negative for a committee.
I mean, the state does the same thing. They put together committees and task force all the time, and it's intermix of representatives and employees of the state, and sometimes they pull people from the outside, and that committee makes the decision of what gets passed on to the legislature.
I just think that as long as they meet the things in the eligibility section, being a resident, a legal voter of the town of Boothbay, then
Well, having served on the original admin and code committee when we got rid of our old bylaws and came into the 21st century, I can tell you I don't remember the reason why that was put in. But we do have an admin review committee that we put together when we did the appointment process. So give it to them. Ask them their opinion.
Given this policy in the admin code, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So that you're not sitting out hashing it amongst yourselves, you're looking for a recommendation from a
Yeah.
good cross-section
Yeah.
of
That's
people,
why
who
we
are
appoint them.
full-time residents and voters.
good idea, Jack. I think
That's a good idea. So we're gonna have to do some appointments.
And some of them may remember, because I know people like Ron Rimmel were on it from the beginning, so maybe he remembers.
So I will, we might have to do some appointments to kick the tires on that. They haven't been active, but this is a great first project.
We appointed them back when we did all the appointments.
Yeah, but the majority, I don't think there's a majority that has accepted their oath. I don't think we appointed a full board, and I think we have to reconstitute a little bit, but I'll follow up on it.
Now we go to new business. Friends of Midcoast Maine proposal for TIF education.
Included in your packet, I had a conversation with Jane LaFleur from Friends of Midcoast Maine, which turned into a conversation between her and Nancy Smith from Grossmart, Maine. We essentially started talking about the trials and tribulations of educating the voters on issues revolving around TIF. Now, Grossmart, Maine does a lot of things with TIFs because Grossmart, Maine really specializes in doing village or downtown improvements and making proper improvements with good planning. So they know a lot about TIFs, and they've hosted lots of education centers, education sessions and stuff like that. So we had a phone conference, and together they put together this proposal that I'm submitting to you now, which essentially says that they would hold a workshop. They would have experts come and speak on TIF, and they would also put together, and this was kind of my idea, a work session to prioritize the use of TIF funds. So it would be an education for people that participate and realize what you could actually use TIF funds for, and then they would prioritize and they would send that report to the selectmen, so that you would know what this cross-section of very educated people on tax increment financing would do with TIF funds if they could. Obviously that doesn't come free, and they put together a cost of putting this together, but it's pretty reasonable. And we send people to training sessions like this all the time, not quite at that cost, but I think we could probably consider inviting people and to cut down on the cost of it. We might be able to get our local towns, I'm not sure if Edgecombe would participate, or Boothbay Harbor, or Southport, or Wiscasset, but there's, we could end up putting a registration fee on it to knock down the cost a little bit. But essentially, we're looking for the selectmen to be able to do this. The benefit is, and what I told them is, in this day of distrust of government, and we were out explaining how TIFs work, that anything that I explained really was not trusted because it was information coming from government. And then really that boils down to the most of our TIF education came from me or something that I facilitated or letters to the editor or stuff. Essentially, we wouldn't participate in this at all. I would attend, but essentially we're not doing anything here. This is an outsider, this is a third party, this is a chance for our voters that are going to vote on a TIF here shortly to get somebody else to talk to them about TIFs.
The only problem I have with that is I think it would hurt. Having non-local people speak on the issue, I think would hurt us more than
We worry about making it a non-controversial, or what should be a non-controversial issue this time around become extremely controversial.
Maybe I'm being naive, and correct me if I'm wrong, all of you guys, but I don't see the TIF being an issue this time. Really.
So far, everything I've seen is
Been positive.
Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward. There's no hidden, we've taken anything that could even begin to sound controversial out of it. You know what I mean?
There's no perceived hidden
Right.
agenda of the selectmen in this. Not that there was ever a hidden agenda before, but there was definitely a perception of that somehow. As much as I like it, I really do, I don't think it would set well with the taxpayers to shell out $2,500 for it.
I think it would actually cost us more than that, because $2,500 is the cost of preparation, presentation, and follow-up. And there's another line in here that says costs for food, room reservation, advertising, and any other expense associated with these will be paid by the town. So
I like it, but I don't think we'd sell it, and I think it would end badly for us.
No, I certainly went out on a leaner on this one, I was just, conversation, like a more conversation.
I mean, we've had that question come to us a couple of times already. How much does this TIF project cost us? You know, how much have you spent to do this? And if you add that on top of that, it just makes it worse.
Yeah, well, we threw our best local experts at the TIF.
I agree.
I know.
There's nobody on this peninsula that knows more about TIFs than I do.
Right.
And I say that pretty confidently. And then we had Ron Epstein, who is the only person that could probably come in and trump me very easily. And it felt like when we spoke about TIFs that information was disregarded.
But I do not believe the TIF, I think TIF got voted down because of all the associated perceptions of what was gonna become of the common and everything else, which had nothing to do with the TIF. But I think that the perception was they were hand in hand.
Oh, and the bond and
Right,
everything.
that's what I mean, was the bond.
And I'm still being asked, you guys are talking about the TIF, does it include that?
Yes.
Rotary?
I-
No.
Exactly. I mean, people, somehow, we wasn't able, they were just reading the tidbits in the paper and not reading as a whole, and was not separating the two out. The people that actually came to the meetings and listened to, I mean, I think, understood, but you don't get many people to come out, they rely on word of mouth.
Yeah, and I don't want to toss anybody's name, but there were several couples actually showed up for a couple of those informational. They came here very much bullheaded, ready to chew us up, and walked out quite satisfied with what they heard. And I think if we had more people actually sitting in this gallery, I think we would have done so much better with that whole proposal. But unfortunately, most people are getting their information from snippets in the register, snippets on the street, chatter in the coffee shops, and that picture over there that showed the rotary over the corner.
Have you guys decided, when you guys reintroduce the TIF at town meeting, will it be written referendum? Do you guys know yet? Or will it be at some point?
We haven't made that decision, but I mean, I think its consensus is written. I mean,
Same as before,
Right.
The most
Yeah.
votes, because you only get 60 or 70 people tops at town meeting for a show of hands. You want as many people
If
voting.
it's written, it's all people.
And you don't want to give the perception either way, whether you're for or against the TIF, of a chance to stack the deck, so to speak, and have 50 of your friends come out one way or the other. Right.
But there'll be public discourse before the vote about.
Oh, we have to have public hearings.
Public hearings again.
Oh, yes. We have
Let's
to.
hope there's a lot less public discourse this time.
Right. But we do have to have public hearings, just like this,
Well, you know-
like we did before.
It was said to me, we voters said, no, what don't you guys understand about that? And I said, did you ever consider that you were wrong?
But that's been in the minority.
Oh,
Really, it has. I mean,
Oh,
I've
yeah,
heard that a few times.
there's fewer negative people.
I've had several people say, I hope you guys bring this back up again, so,
Yeah, I definitely hear that a lot more.
yes.
My intention when working with Jane and Nancy here is that I pulled every string that I had to get education available to the voters. And I think instead of education being available to the voters, the way it appeared was that Jim was pulling every string that he had.
Right.
So this is another one that landed in my lap, and I wanted to make sure you saw it.
I actually understand the philosophy. I mean, if you take us out of the equation, it's a third party, there's no bias there, they're just giving you information. I mean, the whole concept I kind of like, except for the price tag that goes along with it.
I
It
think
can
the
be
concept
something
is
on a
great,
smaller scale.
and I applaud you for thinking outside the box, but I just don't think financially it makes sense.
Maybe we can get Jane or Nancy to do that session with the public to brainstorm on use of the TIF funds, and we might be able to do that at a much cheaper amount. If
I
you're
think it would have to be zero.
If we pay for it, it's going to be perceived as coming from this.
Correct.
The negative thinkers are gonna twist it all around.
I think we
Yeah,
keep
I
the
really
lawyers
want it.
away, we keep everybody away.
Transparency, this is just a tip, nothing else.
Thank you for reviewing it.
So now we have the Lincoln County ACO proposal. And I was looking to see,
A little intimidated bringing this to you.
um, What's the price?
Yeah.
It says contact us if you'd be willing to, and they're not doing it for free, I'm sure.
It's gotta be in the agreement. Honestly, I didn't read it because I thought I already knew the answer.
Well, yeah, you do know that. it might
They're
be.
looking to use existing ACOs.
So they would ask that Betsy or David would go,
Because it comes under number 5, personnel, resources.
They were, if I don't want me to chime in on this, they were originally going after the towns that didn't have an animal control officer and trying to get them to cover those towns. And that's where that all started. We've avoided this because we have Betsy covering us too,
Yeah.
so.
I think we just say thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it feels like we're getting Betsy stolen from us and then used up across Lincoln County, so.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be awful.
If you have a problem and she's up in Wakefield, sorry.
I just want to make sure that this isn't going to cost us even more to help cover those towns that don't have ACOs right now. I mean, being the number 1 tax-paying municipality in Lincoln County, we already pay more than our fair share.
Mhm.
Probably a good question for Commissioner Reserve when he's here.
Yeah, who thought this up? That's the question.
Was it last year that this came down to us? We
Yes.
tore it up and sent it back.
Yeah.
Well, they talked about hiring full-time employees.
Yeah, we started with the preliminary, we participated in the preliminary conversations and the selectmen quickly pulled us back.
Yeah, I just say thanks, but no thanks. So now we'll
It's
go,
not broke, don't fix it.
now we'll go up to what we put to the end, which was the FY 2015 budget. Department reviews, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if we can just go a little bit out of order, based on the first thing I'd like to kind of get out of the way, I don't think it'll take us very long, is the outside organization requests. Essentially, we're looking through them now to see if you want to bring them back for more information for possible funding. If you've made up your mind about no funding, then I'm going to notify them and get it out of the way, and I guarantee you they're going to want to talk to you at some point. So we're just trying to take care of that the beginning part of the budget. So that starts on tab J. Oh, the first, and also I handed out replacement budget pieces for you to put in your binders based on the decisions that you've already made.
None of us remember our books.
One of the benefits.
I'll read aloud. The first one is section tab J, Boothbay Region District Nursing. They're requesting $9,948. They've previously been funded at $10,082, so it's a reduction in their request for one that we previously awarded. So I'd say if you want to say no, then no is an option. More information, or let's just put it on the warrant.
So the request is less?
Less.
Exactly,
No-brainer.
exactly.
So put it on the warrant and not request additional information. Excellent. We'll keep going. The next one is the Charles E. Sherman, Post 36. They're requesting $300. They were on the ballot for $300 last year and $300 the year before.
I think that covers the flags at the cemeteries.
That's correct.
I think that's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
Put it on the warrant.
Yeah.
The next one is Mid-Coast Maine Community Action, are requesting 2020. They were not approved for any funds last year or the year before. Would you like more information?
I don't think we need any more information.
Okay, so we'll just go with denied? Okay.
Unless anybody else.
You hear me say what I think I hear. If you disagree, let me know. The next request is the community fireworks from the town of Boothbay Harbor. I discussed this with you before. This is what was previously going to the Chamber of Commerce. They're requesting $3,000. We've given them $3,000 last year and $3,000 the year before. What's your pleasure?
Now, that money is split up between 4th of July and Windjammers, right?
That is correct.
Oh, we never donated to Windjammers before.
It all goes in one
It all goes
lump
on
sum.
Yeah,
fireworks.
one lump sum, but they split it up.
What happened to their I always thought they took just donations for windjammers.
No.
It's just a fireworks.
And the reason I asked that question is the chamber's no longer running windjammers. That's gone to a
Right.
outside organization.
But I think, if I remember correctly, I read that the fire department, Boothbay Harbor's gonna handle the fireworks for both though, correct?
That's correct. And they're doing it in collaboration with the Friends of Windjammer Days, which is the group that took over Windjammer Days. But I think it's gonna still burn out call. I think people are still gonna attend.
I think we pay it.
I do too.
I mean,
That's my opinion.
Put it on the warrant.
yeah.
The next request is from Boothbay Region Community Television. They're requesting $20,000. They were approved for $20,000 last year and $18,000 the year before.
It's a lot of fun.
Do you want to bring back for more information?
He's here every meeting.
Okay, so we'll move on.
I mean, if it's not up, I don't think we need to.
The next request is for the Boothbay Harbor Memorial Library. They're requesting $45,000. They had requested and were approved for $45,000 the last 2 years.
The only question I have, I don't know if you guys have looked through their, and I happened to look through it because it was an add-on to our notebook, and they had a very, very lucrative year. If you look at revenue.
Financial.
So I guess my question that I think we ought to ask them is, how come they didn't put some of that lucrative year towards offsetting operating costs and lower the assessment?
Bring them in.
Am I wrong in saying, wasn't it the library that I was looking at?
Absolutely. The library,
Yeah, right, they brought them.
I mean, they had a good year, I mean, great, I mean, I don't,
Well, and added to that, an organization that's supported by the towns, who has a big out-of-town contract to do their additions. I don't remember it being in the paper, put it out for bids, the addition that's being put on the library.
Yeah.
And I think-
That's a big addition.
I think any job should be kept local, whenever you can, whether it's the refuge district, or the school department, or, any organization that the town support should be a local contractor that does it, if possible.
they improved their net position $200,000 last year, and $200,000 is their operating budget, so it's a huge change. So we'll invite them for more information. The next one is the woodchucks. They're requesting $600. They did not put in a request last year, which they told me is an oversight, and they were approved for $600 a year before. They used that $600 through the fuel depot.
I was gonna say, I thought we worked it out.
We give them $600 worth of fuel, so no money is ever exchanged.
Yeah, and I think what they do is make that bill, to be honest with you.
Does other towns contribute? They do, don't
Yeah,
they?
we do, we give them 3.
I think they've got all the towns contributing now.
Money well spent.
Right, it's not huge money by any means, and what it does is just that,
That's a little bit of money.
goes a long ways.
We saved $600 easy in wood that they contribute to people that qualify for assistance.
Right.
And you know how many retired gentlemen that keeps active?
The
I mean,
average,
it's amazing to watch them guys over there. I mean, they put a young guy to shame most days.
they have me, they put me to shame. Yeah, the average age is older than Douglas. He got me back, so. The next one is the Boothbay Harbor Cemetery District, requesting $15,000. They requested $14,000 the last 2 previous years.
And I guess it would be nice if they brought an audit with them.
And we have a copy of their budget.
Yeah, we won't probably get one.
And we'll request them to come in with
Now-
information.
I vaguely remember, correct me if I'm wrong here, a few years ago, we were told that we can't give money to someone that's not audited. Is that correct?
That's not correct. We can give money, I mean, like the woodchucks are
I
not
was gonna say the
organized.
woodchucks are not all.
Well, yeah, but I guess there was a term, I don't remember what it was. Well, I guess technically, they're legally responsible. Legally, they have to be audited. So that's their problem, not ours.
Yeah, that is their problem. Yeah. But I mean, honestly, if you're gonna give money to somebody, you don't have evidence of how that money's used, then
Right.
it's hard. I mean, the wood truck's probably not requesting an audit because, you know, if there's foul play over that $600.
Something you could find, if they don't get funded, we could still be responsible for maintaining those cemeteries.
There is a statutory obligation to the town.
Right.
And so usually either municipal or private, and
But
our
being,
cemeteries aren't private cemeteries.
but being a district is a statutory obligation too as well, I believe, to be audited.
Yeah, and usually if you're,
I thought I remember hearing that they did get an audit like last year.
That's what they told us last year, that they were doing it. So, I mean, I'm sure they can bring one and make it easy.
we just request them to come in and bring a copy of the audit.
I mean, it's been 12 months, so if they were doing it last year when they were here, I'm sure they can bring us one.
So I have marked down for a request for more information.
Just the audit.
The next one is Spectrum Generation, Central Maine Area Agency on Aging. They're requesting $500, we have not funded them in the past.
Now, we have our local group that we fund. I forget what they named, they meet at the fire station.
Hospital for urgency, which is
Yes.
totally different hospital.
I'm hearing no.
No.
Oh, while I'm thinking of it, almost forgot. Last year during budget time, speaking of outside organizations, we got a generous contribution from Lincoln County Health. And sitting here, they said that in year 2, it wouldn't be as big, but they would be willing to give another contribution. Here we sit. Have we heard from them?
We have not.
I feel that Jim ought to make that phone call to find out if they do plan on helping contribute. I mean, they said they would. I mean, I remember,
I thought it was just a one-time.
no, they said they would look at it again this year.
They would look at it, they wouldn't guarantee that it would happen, but they would look at it in ongoing years.
Right. For the next, for a couple, 3, kind of do that, taper it down.
Yeah, they implied that it would be a 3-year
Right.
deal.
So I think it's worth that phone call.
I can make that.
Phone call or drafting, letter?
Yeah, probably a letter and get it in writing. Either a letter or an email. Either
I'll
way
do
you
all
think.
3.
I recommend you sign it.
No, no.
You think I'm any better? The next one is Healthy Kids.
Forget about that.
The next one is Healthy Kids. They're requesting $1,800, and we have not approved them in the last 2 years.
Government funded.
Are you still the representative on the Healthy Kids?
I'm
board?
president.
Oops.
What was it?
Edgerton is 17, South Park is 1,700. We serve so many people in this. We're the Child Abuse and Neglect Council of Lincoln County, so we're going into these homes where these kids are being abused or preventing the abuse, and we serve quite a few of them.
Where does the funding come from? Besides,
So this, we raise money. We do get some from United Way,
oh, so you don't get any federal or state money?
not a dime.
Just find out that you guys get some from United, and we had our push down here, I sent some over there.
And you can, if you make a donation to United Way, you can have it earmarked for Healthy Kids. But we have a couple play groups that are going down here
I
and
thought one of the kids was to pay for like teeth cleaning.
No.
I mean, that, by
Well-
the name, that's what you would expect.
Well, we were the Child Abuse, Neglect, and Council of Lincoln County, but people that needed the service didn't want to go to that name.
Stigma.
Yeah, it's the stigma of it. So when we changed it to Healthy Kids, now the people that needed the help would come. But I often have to go to, towns and say, no, we're the Child Abuse and Neglect Council of Lincoln County. Then they go, yes, okay?
Yes, see, I just assumed, honestly, I mean, am I the only one thinking that it paid for dentist appointments,
No.
cleanings and stuff? I mean, healthy kids with that name, that's what you expect.
No, we do the town
Free.
stuff. The sheriff calls us from time to time.
Free
Yeah.
doctor's visits.
Yeah. We don't do any of the,
That's what I mean, that's what you would think.
yeah.
I never thought, but it's for another time.
Mr. Smith had no knowledge that we were gonna go over
I
this.
didn't. I was here for the code enforcement.
Does change the playing field for me.
Yes, it does. I agree. I think that should be put on.
And that, and nothing to do with your presence, other than the education I just got.
Actually, if his president wasn't here, we'd have said nope, not thinking that it was.
Well, so many times, like, I went up to Whitefield, and they were like, no way, and then I told them what they did, and they're like,
Yeah, I
they
was
saw
saying,
the same thing.
You remember when I
I
previously
had no
said, if
idea.
you don't understand it, you vote no?
absolutely.
Yeah, right.
This is a perfect case of.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Perfect case of.
Yeah. They thought it was a food service thing.
Yeah,
Would you like
this is how easy
I
those
think you
things
put it
get
on.
left behind.
more information?
I think you put it on, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I'm glad you stayed.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
And you almost responded.
We're gonna tack it into the code enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for paying that bill for us.
Oh,
You almost pay for it with the reduction in the district nursing.
Little bit. Like some mileage checks for next year.
So the Boothbay Region Alumni Community Band are requesting 600. Nothing last year, 600 the year before.
That was an oversight.
Yeah,
I should
I think you're right.
I'd say it's, yeah.
More. And the intention is to have individualized questions like we did last year, and they went fast. Next is the Boothbay Region Historical Society. They're requesting 2,000. They've requested 2,000 in the last 2 years.
Have they been given 2,000 last year?
Yep.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, most of these organizations, right after July 1, they put in their request, and as soon as taxes come in, we pay them.
I would like a question answered though. I realize that they're extremely limited on space being in the one house down there, but how well are their records maintained? Not their business records, but everything that's given to them.
Would you like to bring them in for more
Well, if
information?
you just ask the question, that's. Because I know some of Boothbay's historical records are down there.
Oh, really? Why would they be down there and not up here?
You go online, and you'll have a whole list of stuff that they have, and some are historical records.
Email library.
So the 2,000 that we pay them, I mean, it must go towards preserving them, I would assume. Someday, that's for another time, we'll ask her to explain what she does.
I mean, they don't really give us an audit either. They give you a profit and loss overview, you know. I reached out to the Historical Society for the annual report this year, knowing that we're going to mark our 250th anniversary. That we thought it would be nice to have some participation with historical perspective for the cover and the back cover. We haven't got that conversation going, but we've already reached out to them. Continuing on, Boothbay Region Senior Citizens, this is the one that was oversight last year and we fixed. They're requesting 1,000, we gave them 1,000 this year just through different means, and 1,000 the year before.
Yeah.
And then Lincoln County Dental is requesting 1,500. They have not been funded in the past.
Who was it? I'm sorry.
Lincoln County Dental.
Lincoln County.
They haven't been funded in the past.
Okay. I think I've got my marching orders, that's pretty easy. So the next thing that we wanted to take care of today were budget reviews for the departments. I don't have department heads here today, but honestly, they weren't gonna go over budget with you. They were gonna be available for the intricacies of their department operations. We'll bring them in for that discussion at another time, but we can knock out the budget now if it's helpful. First and easiest, because I'm the department head, is general government. General government is tab B in your binders. You can see that there isn't a lot of change here. A reduction of 2.4% in the administration line, and that's attributed to the healthcare change. There is an increase in code enforcement, but it's not anything close to what we saved last year. And overall, for general government, is a negative 0.4% request. Obviously, if we have more information before we get here, I will offset our expenses by $12,000, and that would be nice. That is the goal.
Jim, what is your budget for, when you do the salaries? What percent do you budget?
What do you mean? What, for salaries? I take the real, actual.
No, for increases.
For increase?
Yeah.
What do you figure on a max?
Right.
Yeah, I figure that everybody's gonna average out at a 3% wage increase, and then we do their performance evaluation and factor out merit. Now, people are usually around that 3%, but honestly, good employees sometimes get more, and poor performing employees get less. So the average is 3%.
But that 3% gives you a pool to work from.
Yeah, so essentially, I figure that if everybody got a 3% raise, then that's what it looks like. Now, obviously, the selectmen have the discretion to say, well, we want to make that pool less, 2% or more, 150%.
The only reason why I ask is I do have a problem in this day and age of anybody getting a 5% raise. You know, I mean, they could walk on water, and I still, in this day and age, you know, I mean, I'm not saying that they're not worth it, but that's just me speaking.
Nobody's scheduled to get a 5% raise. Do employees get substantial raises? Certainly. We've had some employees that started off on a wage scale that probably was entry level, and now are no longer at entry level wage. And if you look at percentages, they might get 5%. I don't know without going back at records.
The steps are included in that, right?
Yeah, steps are included in these 3%. So I mean, if somebody gets a major step, it cuts out of what I have for merit pay. But I never budget more than 3% average. So that's code enforcement and the business office. Any questions? No? Who's satisfied with that wage raise platform? The next one would be tab C, is Public Works Department. The Public Works Department is our largest expenditure, largest budget expenditure. Always has been. And because it is so large, it often sees the largest increases as well. So the general public works category, so this is all of the operations of public works, sees a 1.9% increase. Some of that is attributed in different fashions. A $1,000 increase to tires. Tires have always been under budgeted, and really we overexpense. So now we're just making an adjustment to that to compensate. We've added a little bit more in supplies because the cost of supplies have increased, and we seem to be exceeding that budget line as well. Repairs and maintenance is up pretty drastically. That's the biggest increase, $10,000 increase out of a originally $20,000 budget, so a large increase to maintenance, which if you look at our records, we've expended. So if you think of the pool of public works money, if we're expending out of maintenance and we're not expending all out of snow removal, we're just cutting ourselves out at some other place.
The 50% increase in repairs and maintenance, I know we've been doing a lot of repairs to vehicles. Is that due to the fact that we need to get a new vehicle?
Yes and no. I when you have Mike in here, you'll get a first-hand statement of that we've had a lot of repairs in the last 2 years.
So he is going to come to our next meeting.
Yeah, we'll bring him in, and we can ask these questions more intimately. In his statements would be that, yeah, we've had a lot of breakdowns, but now we're fixing them, and in our opinion, we're fixing them thoroughly, so that we don't have the same breakdown twice.
So, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
All that repairs that we did to the backhoe 3, 4, 5 months ago with that extensive front end, are we trailing it now?
That's the intent, that's what's been handed down.
Okay.
Are we not sure that we're trailing?
No, I don't know. I'm asking that question. I mean, I know we've asked
Yeah.
for several years now.
You had to look that, you weren't quite sure that was happening.
They didn't want you guys to go across by the government.
Was it on the trailer?
No,
Oh,
I came and spoke to them about it.
Yeah, and I talked to Mike that
I mean, this time of year especially, it's hard on the vehicle, let alone, I mean, them backhoes are terrible anyways.
Yeah, jeez.
Two of mine on the road today, I know what that really like.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, the repair that we did to the backhoe wasn't because of the last couple of years, it's because of the last 10.
No, I agree. Yes, I don't want to make it sound like that they're abusing it in the last year. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah. No, you're right, that was an expensive bill to pay, and hopefully we made that change. It's been informally handed down, it's not a formal policy. And yeah, if you see the backhoe driving around town, give me a call, I'll look into it. I'd say our biggest culprits are 5500s, which we've told you our plan. Our plan is to replace them sooner than we anticipated. And we estimate that in the future, we'll be able to bring this line back down. But until we replace them, we just don't know. I mean, constantly, especially electrical malfunctions in 5500s, you have a fuel pump that just doesn't work one day. And you gotta hook it up to some computer, and it's been,
I think there's a reason why GMC don't make them anymore.
yeah, I think you're right.
But still, realistically, even though you have less repairs, this line may not come down because the cost of repairs just keep going up.
It's true, it is true. But I mean, at least we're fixing the problem. I mean, we can't control the cost of repairs, but we're fixing our immediate problem.
When we buy vehicles, because of the nature of the beast, of what we do with them, do they still offer extended warranties?
And yeah, as a matter of fact, you can include it in your.
I mean, I think that we'd be stupid not to. If you can, I didn't know because of the environment you're putting in, if they offer it, I mean, we're living proof up at the refuse district that, boy, they're worth their salt.
Extended warranties, yeah.
It's within trucks, I mean, you've seen the bills, it doesn't take anything to run up $1,000, $1,500 bucks.
Yeah.
I think it's something worth looking at as we buy them. That's all.
Yeah, the major truck that we bought since I've been here was the rescue, and obviously the firefighters had a very active hand in putting together that bid spec. We've already got a strategy for a bid spec for this year, and we're gonna bring that to you. I don't know how it's been done in the past, this is my first major vehicle with you guys. We're gonna bring you our bid spec, ask for permission to put it out to bid, receive bids, bring it back to you, you're gonna decide. We're gonna give you our input, and I can tell you that we've got favorites, and we'll tell you why.
If you take like them 5500s, so if they'd have bought and had warranty, if it was offered, back then, I mean, they had a lot of problems with them right out of the gate. Them problems wouldn't have been ours if we had a 5-year warranty, because you're never gonna go over on the miles. I mean, they don't put no miles on these vehicles,
Yeah.
so.
It's my opinion that the internationals break in places that have wear spots. You know, they break where you expect them to break. The 5500s break where they want them.
Random.
But if you're talking a bigger truck and have a turbo, you replace the turbo, you're talking $2 or $3, $4 grand. Trust me, I know. I mean, just a quick example, we bought an extended warranty on one of our trucks when we first started doing the trucking. It was in the shop 23 times in a year. It was towed, I think, 9. And luckily, they offered towing as part of that warranty. We took it for the extra $150. It got towed 9 times. We got our money's worth.
I guess maybe.
So, I mean, it's just,
One tow would have been.
yes,
like
it was
a-
well worth
Wow.
the investment of buying the extended warranty, so.
We think that these adjustments in the budget are adjustments based on trends that we've seen in the past. They're not requesting more additional money. We don't plan on doing anything more than we've done in the past. We just need to pay for it more appropriately. So those constitute the major changes in the general public works budget. I'll continue on if nobody has any questions. Snow removal is an increase of 4.2%. Essentially, we are putting a little bit more money into our salt line. I know it says salt and calcium. We don't use calcium except for weird situations. I just haven't updated that. This is a strategy move. We have experimented in the last couple of years with using more salt and heavier mixes as part of strategy to try for road improvement during the winter months. And honestly, we've seen benefits. Dollar to dollar, salt is going to win a fight versus labor every single time. So we think this is a good strategy, put a little bit more money in salt, and we've been underspending our salt annually, so this is a strategic move, and easily one where you guys could say, I don't agree with you, Jim, you don't need enough.
I personally would like to see us make that move a little more. I don't want to see us go away with sand, because there's times when salt's useless.
Right.
Like tonight, it would do it,
Yeah.
boy, salt makes all the difference. I mean, look how quick the state roads bear once the storm's over with. And there's a reason for that, it's salt.
And liquid calcium.
Yeah.
They treat them
They do.
before.
Right? But the salt makes all the difference in the world, it really does. I mean, you can see how, you go by the public works garage after a storm, and that will be the only bad road there is, because that's where the trucks come out of all the time, it's falling off. So, I think that 75-25 is a great idea
Well,
to get there. You know?
you can tell the town's policy, because I just came across a river road this afternoon. You can tell Newcastle, Edgecombe, and Boothbay, with the three towns stop in the condition of the road. Who uses a lot of salt and who doesn't use much salt.
Well,
No.
while we're on the snow, public works, I think they deserve a huge pat on the back. And I know you sent an email out a couple weeks ago stating the same thing. I mean, the roads have been in great shape after a storm, in my opinion. I think they look really good. They look great.
Better than I've seen it in years.
Yes.
I don't know, that bad as our road, I have to come out every once in a while and say something, because it's a mess and there's a lot of slush on it.
Problem is it's
They
gotta
do that
work.
just for you.
Yeah, right, but it's a mess.
I mean, I'm just the opposite. I think Dale's right. I think it's the best they've looked in a long time.
Now, I'm gonna state, and I'm not putting names up there, but I have heard somebody that lives over on Barters Island that has been complaining about the roads. So I don't know if it's just that area of town, or if those roads, or what. But honestly, what I see, they look better than they ever used. I don't travel to Barters Island all that often.
I know I sent Mike an email, I've actually sent Mike two. The first one I sent to him, I had to come to work early one morning, and I would much rather have driven on our roads than 27 that day. Because as I went by River Road and Hardwick Road, those roads look 1,000% better than 27 that day.
We better stop there, because if not, Stuart's already taking notes. He's thinking of how we can do their roads too, man.
I'll do their roads is the price attached. Don't tell your private contractor I said that. But it's a really interesting conversation, one that I've had with a lot of people this year about strategies that you use during winter months, and it's pretty dynamic. It's not you just throw down sand and salt. There's a different strategy for every storm, and every storm throws you a curveball.
Right.
And in this town, you might have to use 5 different strategies for 5 different parts of town. In Douglas's area, the only immediate defense that I have is that that's an area where we have 2 routes that are kind of overlapping. So one road may not look the same as the other road at the same time.
The only complaints that I've heard is could they come out a half an hour sooner?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
We've been horrible at mailboxes this year, we know, because the accumulation of snow came quickly and
Stretch out.
They don't even hold a candle to the state.
I don't know,
The 27's been getting cleaned off left and right every storm.
there was a stretch by my house where they took out a line of them.
Yeah.
My father-in-law being one of them.
Beath Road was a lot of phone calls, yes, it was.
Back Narrows took a pretty good hit.
But every
Same
mailbox,
driver does bad arrows.
Yeah.
But every mailbox except for Mr. Burnham's has been an accident.
Well, mine, I just swing mine all the way so they can't hit it.
Well, that's,
Are you making that a challenge to
No,
them?
it's all the way. I go swing it and the only day
I remember the last time you was there.
Mine swings out of the way
You
if I
guys wouldn't do,
remember.
you guys wouldn't do nothing. I had to fix it myself.
Just like me,
And it was done on purpose, it was done on
So
purpose.
Douglas, are you sitting there right now proposing that the Board of Selectmen start spending money replacing mailboxes?
Well,
You, remember what I just said, you want,
that case of mine, yes, they should have.
but nobody else.
Because that guy, only time he put his wing down halfway up, when he come off across Sawyer's Island Bridge, he'd come up, and I was walking up the driveway when he did it. Broad daylight, the sun was shining, whang, goes my mailbox.
We replaced them.
Huh?
Really?
Yeah, we did.
See, we developed, what is it, must have been 5, 6 years
Well,
ago.
we always
We
used
use
to
the
be
same
like
policy
that.
as the city.
Yeah.
I lost mine 5 times in 1 winter. P.O. box.
Well, mine's on a nice little, mine just swings it out of the way. Even the wind will blow it all the way down, if they're real close out there.
Road improvements, we're proposing a flat budget. You obviously saw my other proposal that we discussed before, but that's not in the official budget at this time. So that's flat funded, and I just like to reiterate, every time we flat fund road improvements, we're really reducing the amount of miles that we pay.
I have a question, do we use the reclaim from the refuse district?
Yes.
So,
I haven't seen the line for cold patch, that's why I had to think of it.
Yeah, he, speaking out of turn, 2 hats per minute. He has quite a pile of it out back. It comes both to the harbor and to Boothbay, we kind of rotate them.
And coal patch applications versus reclaim application could be 2 totally.
Right.
yeah.
Yes, but when I happen to see cold patch, I have to take the reclaim. They both black.
All right.
Well, that's the advantage of us hiring Mike. His background is he has a lot of familiarity with different products, and we've tried a lot of different things. Fuel purchase, we are recommending $2,000 increase to the fuel purchase line, which we've been really good at saving money in there. Honestly, this is just a prediction of fuel prices in the future. I'd rather have more and not use it than
They've been fairly stable, haven't they?
yeah.
So there's no guarantee they'll have it next.
Yeah.
Along that line, is there a surcharge now on fuel?
There is a surcharge.
That the town of Boothbay is charging other people, I should say.
That's correct. We add 5 cents per gallon to people that are not, to organizations that are not the town of Boothbay. We did bring up a year and a half ago the possibility of us revisiting that issue, and honestly, my opinion is we don't need it anymore. The administration of the fuel depot is effortless.
Well, I'm going somewhere with this.
Yep.
You covered half of what I was going to say, because I remember you bringing that up. The other half of that is, I think that if you could put up a reasonable canopy over that, you would save a lot. I mean, we're always replacing nozzles and stuff up there because they freeze, because they get wet and get ice in them and they freeze. And then people bang them on the ground and knock the little safety thing out of them and they don't work. But I mean, you have to sometimes stick the nozzle in the cab or in the exhaust of your diesel or not to get it to thaw in order to use it. I mean, that's not safe.
But that was happening when there was a malfunction in the nozzle.
Right, but it still does, it still can freeze. You know, I mean, with that safety thing. And I don't know what a canopy would cost, but it would almost make sense if the town's getting 5% of that, and you're saying we don't need it anymore, why not take that 5%, put it into something that would benefit the town crews that's out at midnight, 1 o'clock in a blinding snowstorm. I mean, they're up there underneath their wing, because that's where their fuel tank is, and the snow's with a canopy, it would protect.
Well, don't forget too, it may not be a whole lot, that 5% is still revenue.
It is.
And it's 5 cents, not 5%.
5 cents.
5
Right,
cents
5
on
cents.
every gallon.
Yeah.
So,
And,
what's about 2%?
but theoretically, if, that's going to school and other organizations that are part of the tax levy, so what comes around goes around.
Yeah.
So, I still think that a more practical application is that the people that use the fuel depot use it a little more patiently and with a little more conscience. We've witnessed people abusing those nozzles, and then they malfunction, then they freeze up,
So Steve, you bring volunteer.
No, it has not been the refuse district. Most of our issues have been with the school district, and not the other Steve either, so. So you guys are all, you're innocent. But honestly, it's not a gas station, so people don't treat it with the respect of a gas station. But we can explore that, it's gonna be expensive.
I know we've talked about it, dating back probably, well, it was 5, 6 years ago now that we actually all got together to discuss the fees. It was prior to Jim coming. Each user of it got together and said, what's the plan, what do we, and that's how we kind of come up with that was a wish list then.
I think that was on the wish list prior to the guys falling out.
Right. And that was, I think truth be told, one of the reasons why they did pull out. It gives them a canopy. It sounds like a little thing, but the public works guys, when they're at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and you're tired and you've got to stand out there in that crap and pump your gas, it's just the little things that you can do. If we can do it without a cost, you know what I mean?
You jump out of that one ambulance, it's
Yeah.
awful.
We'll be able to look at that a little bit more when the tip is passed.
True.
That's true. That'd be a good place to use tip money.
I don't know.
You could use TIF money and replenish TIF funds with the surcharge.
You probably could build one yourself, hire someone to build one cheaper than you could buy an actual canopy.
Yeah, I think if we were building a gas station style canopy, it'd be expensive. We could look at.
You mean a large one that you would be driving under,
A shelter.
other than
Right.
just the angled ones that you see in some places?
Do we
Something to
want
explore later on, that's all.
to budget funds, or do we want to keep them?
I think if you keep it the way it is and.
I say keep it the way it is.
Yeah. But we'll explore it and see if we can come up with a better budgetary number. So that is Public Works. I took some out of order though, because really fire department was tab C, but you guys weren't reading it, so you didn't know this. So Public Works is actually tab D. We'll do fire department when Dickie's in here, we're gonna bring him in for that. And we've kind of covered a lot of the other areas of the operating budget. So if there aren't any questions about that, then we can talk about scheduling of the other outside organizations, like the Refuse District and BRAS, which we haven't really even talked about yet. We are on 122 right now, and we plan on doing the fire department next. And we plan on doing funding requests on the 19th, which would be the people that we said we want to bring back, the library and stuff like that. But that's not going to be very many. So maybe if we earmark the 19th for BRAS and the Refuse District, which,
Wait a minute. We're meeting on February 12th, right?
Yeah, you said that.
Yeah, 12
Just
to
the
26.
26. 26. Yeah, yeah, I've got some dates on here. Good catch. So the second meeting in February, the 26th.
26.
So if we set that aside and make sure that we have representatives from those organizations here, and if they're not ready, we can push it off.
Unless we're gonna come in an hour early for meet with Edcom.
I was thinking about just putting it in the regular.
Right.
So this is the regular.
So Steve will have to jump from the side of the table that does.
Twice.
Twice.
Actually, Jocko took for one, well, technically where he sits on the refuse district board.
But he's a selectman appointee, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So is that really technically?
I don't know, technically it probably isn't.
I'm comfortable doing
I mean, I don't think technically it is, that's my opinion.
Yeah, you guys appoint Chuck to represent your interests on that board, so when he comes back here, I think he.
either. Actually, I'm appointed by the board to represent the town's interests, not just the board's.
When I meant them, I meant the town.
We are the town's interest, really.
Right. So then our next meeting is gonna be the fire department. I'll also bring in our department heads. Kind of giving a lot of liberty to Pete for harbor master, because the budget implications are pretty small. But I really told our department leaders that I just want them to exchange staring glances with the selectmen once a year. So then we'll do funding requests on 2/26. And then that means we really have 2 more meetings to do the final things on budget. We're way on track. I like the schedule, it works really pretty well. What are we missing on budgetary? I think the only thing that I guess I need to know, we can start doing mock warrants here pretty soon. The only thing I'll need to know is what we're gonna do at the next meeting for the land trust. Are we going forward? If we go forward, is that gonna be a secret ballot question, or is that gonna be an open town meeting?
I think it's gotta be secret ballot, right?
Same deal, we just don't want to have people going in stacking the deck, you know,
I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I think anything that has to do with anything should be secret ballot.
That was that time with all the
But think
funds.
about it, I mean, you literally, you said, we have 70 people that come to town meeting.
If it's important.
And I'm a traditionalist, and I think we need to revisit putting the
Oh, trust
entire
me.
warrant on the ballot.
I was with you when they did it, that 1-year trial. I said, go back to town meeting. I am a traditionalist too. I love the idea of people being able to come face to face with Jim or with Chuck or with any of us and say, why did you do this? But it's just a thing of the past.
Yeah, and, honestly, if you did a referendum, you could toy with your meeting day too, and think about the complications that we have with not knowing what the school district funding is gonna be when we go to town meeting, which, I mean, it makes a big difference. Am I gonna vote yes on a few $1,000s if I know we don't really have it? And that's a big.
The thing is our administrative code says that it'll be on such and such a date, right?
Yes.
So you'd have to change that, but town meeting can be either ballot or an open meeting, correct? Or do you have to change that as well?
By your determination, by the board's discretion.
Oh, okay, so we wouldn't have to change administrative code as long as we stuck with the same date for now, right?
Right.
Right.
I'm just saying, if you're gonna make changes, I would throw a monkey wrench into just think about your meeting date. Because if you're doing a referendum, traditionally, then it doesn't matter what day you sit down in the old town hall, if you're just gonna come in to vote via ballot anyway, you could, and I'm not saying it's the right thing, I'm just saying it's a possibility. You could change your date so it's closer to the school's vote. The legislative session in Augusta is finished. You just know a lot more about what the commitment's gonna look like by that date. Maybe a close to June date. Now, if something fails, you have to bring it back pretty quickly before July 1.
If we're going to do that, I would almost want to get the feel of the people before we did that, though.
Yeah.
And put out another referendum question of going to try it for a year or something.
An advisory question.
Yeah.
We could put together a poll that we could issue at the same time.
I think you just put it right on the ballot.
We had an advisory question on the ballot once before that asked if they wanted to go to the ballot or stay with the open town meeting format. We went to the ballot for a year, and then
everybody said they wanted to go back, so we did.
Yeah.
Well, it's not everybody, the majority.
When I'm saying that the selectmen have the authority to do a referendum, if you then take your authority and give it to town meeting and they say yes or no, then that's the final side too, so. So now it's not a selectman authority, it's a town meeting authority.
It all depends on if you ask a
It depends
strict
on,
question or
Right.
an advisory question.
depends on how you ask the question, depends on how you phrase it.
As long as we just ask a very generic question, that, you know, would you like to try it for a year, and we'll bring it back next year for the same, you
Because I
know.
know the last time, and I can't remember how it was worded in the warrant then, but that was an advisory question only.
And then, I think, I mean, the way I would see it is as an advisory question, and then that next year, you, if they approved it, you would have your ballot, they'd go down through and check yes or no on everything, and at the end of that ballot, you would say, do you want to keep it this way, or do you want it back over? I mean, after they've actually spent the time, however long it took, it gives them a great opportunity to say, hey, I like this idea.
No, I think it's a great idea, I'm just kind of trying to poke holes.
I think we, that's my opinion. You all done with your budget stuff?
That's all I have.
Public comment. All the public is left.
Darren, to have public comment at the beginning and at the end?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we allow public comment as we're discussing things too. So, I mean,
Someone could develop an agenda as the meeting goes
Right.
along.
public
And
comment
then they
really,
can let it out at the end.
it kind of covers things that's not on the agenda really, because other than that, we're very interactive. So,
You may have come really happy and end up with an attitude by the end of the meeting, you say.
okay, I will entertain a motion to review the warrants and sign them upon review.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? I'm not even going to ask for discussion on that.